Good morning. It's 3 minutes after 10. I was going to try not to open the programme this morning by talking about Kidderminster Harriers, or as I should say, National League North promotion winners taking up their rightful place in the National League. Do you know, we were 14th at the beginning of April, and we've gone up with the second promotion. That's an astonishing achievement. 9 wins on the bounce, 4 of which were against top 5 teams. It's the kind of magic that only non-league football can produce. You just don't get these fairy stories in normal circumstances. So congratulations to Russ Penn and his team, and to Richard Lane, the chairman, and to the astonishing squad of players who have truly performed a miracle and gave me yesterday one of the finest days of my life. I can't name them all. I will name them all a little later in the programme, but I've got to obviously get the phoning up and running. Shane Ward bossing the midfield as usual. Joe Fawkes, characteristically tireless. Ashley Hemmings, needless to say, slotting home 2. Should have had a hat-trick. And many, many more. But good Lord above, what an absolute treat that was. Thank you. 4 minutes after 10 is the time. There's a bloke called Peter Cruddus. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was treasurer, or he had a role in the Conservative Party many moons ago, actually, and he got into a little bit of bother. There was legal action, and some of it he succeeded in, and some of it he failed in. So I'm going to make sure I get the facts absolutely right. This is from Dominic Lawson. Even a stop clock is right twice a day. Writing in the Daily Mail today, Cruddus was later found to have informed 2 reporters from the Sunday Times, posing as possible donors, that if they donated large sums to the Conservative Party, they would have an opportunity to influence government policy and to gain unfair commercial advantage through confidential meetings with the Prime Minister and other senior ministers. Right, pay attention, okay? Pay attention. Those are the words of Lord Justice Jackson in 2015, when the Court of Appeal partially overturned a successful libel claim that Cruddus had taken against the Sunday Times. I'll read you that again. Cruddus denied wrongdoing and claimed his comments were just bluster. However, he was later found to have informed 2 of its reporters, posing as possible donors, that if they donated large sums to the Conservative Party, they would have an opportunity to influence government policy and to gain unfair commercial advantage through confidential meetings with the Prime Minister and other senior ministers. This Cruddus dude got nominated for a peerage himself by Boris Johnson, and every single member of the House of Lords Appointments Committee asked him to rescind the offer. Every single member, a unanimous decision by the House of Lords Appointments Committee, said, please don't do that. But Johnson, needless to say, did it anyway, stuck him in the House of Lords. And a few days later, the Times reported he'd given £500,000 to the Conservative Party. Now, how loud do I have to shout that to you? Why are we talking about this? Because Cruddus is one of the people claiming that Keir Starmer is trying to rig elections by giving the vote to human beings. So a bloke found by a court to be offering unfair commercial advantage and access to prime ministers, influence over government policy in return for donations to the Conservative Party, is accusing Sir Keir Starmer, former Director of Public Prosecutions, of trying to rig elections by giving votes to human beings, to British residents, to British citizens in the case of 16 and 17-year-olds, and to British taxpayers in the case of people with settled status. That is a wonderful illustration, and I am currently compiling loads of them for my new book. Cruddus is in it. That is a wonderful illustration of just, I'll tell you who else is in it, Rocco Forte. Do you remember him? Along with Witherspoons, he was pretty much the only bloke in the hospitality sector who was in favour of Brexit. He's given an interview today saying he's thinking of emigrating to Italy because everything's going so badly in this country. So he campaigns to abolish your freedom of movement, but uses his own to flee the scene of the crime. That's a mark of who these people are, and it doesn't cross their mind that they're not entitled to behave in this way. That's breathtaking. You've got to be amazed by that, right? He's busted for flogging influence, flogging access, and then claims that Keir Starmer is trying to rig elections by giving votes to actual people. You wouldn't have to pay for it, by the way, if under these proposals being considered by Keir Starmer. You wouldn't have to give £500,000 to the Labour Party as an EU citizen or a foreign-born citizen with settled status in this country, or indeed as a 16 or a 17-year-old, perhaps the child of a war hero, if you want to get sentimentally tabloid about it. You wouldn't have to give £500,000 to the Labour Party. You just get the vote by dint of deserving it. But these people, and the Daily Mail has got it on its front page today, inevitably, these people think that giving votes to people is somehow wrong and corrupt, but giving influence and access to incredibly rich people, and indeed peerages, is absolutely fine. That's the country that we live in. And the crucial point is that they don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's not that they think they'll get away with it if nobody finds out. It's not that they think, well, no one is really going to... They don't think there's anything wrong with it. They think they are born better than you. Cruddas is one of these people that left school at 15 with no qualifications, made a ton of money, and therefore thinks that he's possessed of some sort of innate superiority. Marginally better, I suppose, than inheriting it like Rocco Forte did and thinking that he's possessed of some sort of innate superiority. These people like sort of, I don't know, Henry VIII courtiers, they honestly believe that they are better than you and therefore they should live by different rules and different standards. You think I'm exaggerating? What did they do when Owen Paterson got busted for breaking the rules, for breaching the standards? They tried to rip up the rule book. Who was at the front of that queue? Jacob Rees-Mogg. What did Jacob Rees-Mogg say yesterday? That Ukraine would have fallen to the Russians if it wasn't for Brexit. The man will lie about anything because they don't think that they need to abide by the same rules and regulations that the rest of us have to follow. Right, stop that now because I'm writing my book live on air. You can tell I had my head down at the weekend, apart from the bit when I was at Brackley Town. Great hosts, by the way, for Kidderminster Harriers' glorious victory in the National League North playoff final. Did I mention that yet? No, I didn't think so. I'll probably touch on it a little later in the programme. So that's the backdrop that you need to understand once you are, or before you are, being softened up to object to the idea of 16 or 17-year-olds getting the vote. That's what you need to understand. The kind of people who are going to object to it are the kind of people who get found by high court judges to have been peddling influence and access to the most senior politicians in the land. The kind of people who get seats in the House of Lords against the advice of the House of Lords Appointments Commission and by complete coincidence subsequently make six-figure donations to the party that has put them in the House. So they're the kind of people who are telling you, the Daily Mail will be telling you to resist this up, but just think about it. Just think about it. Of course, you don't even have to give the Labour Party your vote if you get it, if you are giving it. You can vote for whoever you want. You can vote for the monster raving loony party should you so desire. So what I want to talk about is why it is a good idea to give the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds. I'd like to draw upon experiences elsewhere. I know that in Scotland and Wales you get a vote for the local parliament, for the national parliament, don't you? If you're 16 or 17, you can vote to put MSPs in the Scottish Parliament. You can vote to put politicians in the Senate. So that in terms of the impact it's had on your life when you were younger, if you exercise that vote, or if younger people in your life have exercised that vote, I'd love to hear from you on 0345 6060973. But the fundamental question, the central question here for me is, how can you object to democracy in this way? I mean, the great flaw in UK democracy is that it's ill-informed, is that so many people, myself included, cast votes without knowing all of the things that we should know before we cast a vote. I'm thinking more of the referendum when I say that than I am general elections or local elections. But because our media is so absolutely bent double, frankly, bent backwards, the idea of you getting the information you need to cast your vote in a full and frank way is a little bit pie in the sky. And remember, the kind of people that donate huge sums of money to the Tory party don't think the media is bent enough. So they've set up their own TV stations now, which don't have any viewers, but manage to get traction on social media. So why on earth would 16 and 17-year-olds not deserve the vote? Okay, that's the first question. I've got 3 or 4 more minutes of introduction, but you can dive in now if you want and book your place on the switchboard. 0345 6060973. I say 3 or 4, it's probably going to be 7 or 8. You know how it works, but I'll do my best to bring it in on time. The sooner you get engaged with politics, the better. You know? It's something as simple as tuition fees. They're not actually going to affect any voters directly, are they? Anyone today directly affected by tuition fees is going to be over 18. And yet the 16 and 17-year-olds who will be most directly affected are excluded from the franchise. They are not allowed to vote. I would like to have a friendly disagreement on this. I mean, if you do think it's unfair, but I don't think you think it's unfair. I think you're just worried that the massive majority of votes cast by 16 and 17-year-olds would go to a Liberal or a left-wing party. And, of course, that opens another line of inquiry, which I'm going to find quite amusing. Why? Why are younger people more likely to be compassionate, generous, fair, open-minded, equable? What is it? What happens to us as we get older that makes us more likely to be right-wing instead of open-minded, compassionate, fair, more equable, all of the things that you would generally consider growing up to be attributes that should be nurtured and encouraged? And yet here we are, down with 16 and 17-year-olds because they might vote. And they're even saying it out loud, you know. The numbers of people who got turned away because they didn't have the correct voter ID are deeply, deeply troubling. But the Labour Party is somehow rigging votes by letting people vote. The Tories have... Just think about this. If the Cruddas example isn't enough for you, the Conservative Party has actively prevented people who have the right to vote from voting. But by extending the right to vote to more people, the Labour Party would somehow be seeking to rig elections. How bent do you have to be to think that that is a valid position to pursue, a valid position to argue? Well, you have to be the editor of the Daily Mail. Labour accused of plot to reverse Brexit by giving millions of European workers in UK and British teenagers the vote. All right, quickly, how does that reverse Brexit? Spoiler alert, it just doesn't. But they hold their readers in such contempt that they think that by simply sticking it on the front page, it will somehow become true. So the Conservative Party has actively and successfully sought to prevent British citizens who have the right to vote from voting. I'm going to say that again because it's desperately important. The Conservative government has actively and successfully sought to prevent British citizens who have the right to vote from voting. And yet today, your corrupt right-wing media is attempting to persuade you that the Labour Party's attempt to give more British citizens the right to vote is an unfair or dishonest attempt to manipulate democracy. That's how stupid they think you are. Please prove them wrong. 0345 6060 973. Why on earth should the 16 or the 17-year-old in your life not have the vote? 0345 6060 973. Don't forget that not long ago UKIP was getting a significant number of votes in elections in this country. If ever there was a mark of people who haven't got a clue about what they're voting for, it would surely be that. And yet 16 and 17-year-olds somehow lack the wherewithal, lack the nous, lack the knowledge, lack the understanding of politics to vote in a country that just 7 short years ago saw people over the age of 18 vote to become the first population in the history of humanity to impose economic sanctions on itself. Do me a favour. And it's not just funny to see such epic hypocrisy, it's scary. Because the question of what will they do next if they get away with this is a question that we should be asking ourselves every single day. And you saw it this weekend. You saw someone gifted a peerage by Boris Johnson against the unanimous advice of the House of Lords Appointments Commission. A large part of that advice presumably built on the fact that a High Court judge had found him to have been in the business of peddling influence and access and opportunities to influence government policy to very, very rich people prepared to make donations to the Conservative Party. He was accusing other people of somehow trying to manipulate votes. Within weeks, within days of the Conservative government successfully and actively trying to rob British citizens of their vote. Riddle me that. 10:17 is the time. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 21 minutes after 10, and if you think I'm exaggerating about the voter ID story, then this Cruddas character has said the quiet part out loud, such as his grasp of integrity and political reality. If Labour wins a big majority at the next election, they will reduce the voting age to 16. Okay? They will abolish voter ID. and they will introduce proportional representation. The last bit isn't true, making it almost impossible for the Conservative Party to win an outright majority in the future. He said it out loud. Voter ID is literally designed to increase the Conservative vote share. That's a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, a bloke who got his gong after the House of Lords Appointments Commission unanimously advised Boris Johnson not to give it to him. So he thinks he deserves a seat in the House of Lords, but your 17-year-old doesn't deserve a vote. Why not? Well, because they are statistically more likely to vote Labour than Tory. But this dude has gone too far. Presumably by accident, they will abolish voter ID. You might as well say, if Labour get in, they will abolish our corrupt and deeply, deeply sinister attempt to rob British citizens of their right to vote. He said it out loud. That's what I mean about the combination of entitlement and ignorance being absolutely toxic. Jenny's in Shrewsbury. Jenny, what would you like to say?
Hi. There is a country in Europe that's actually given the vote for 16 and 17-year-olds already, Austria.
Only the one, is it?
And Germany, there are some states that they are allowed to vote in local elections or regional elections.
Well, we've got Wales and Scotland, of course, which are a bit closer to home.
Okay, yeah. It hasn't actually changed the direction that things are travelling in already.
There's not enough of them, is there, really? Unless it's a squeaky bum type vote.
Yeah, but mainly what I wanted to say is that it has actually engaged more of them to vote.
Of course it has.
Yeah, and this, I'm reading some evidence online written by an Austrian Journal of Electoral Studies, and he said exactly this. I'm a German teacher, so I know about sort of the politics in Germany.
Okay.
And it's basically encouraged more younger people to vote, and there is no difference between 16 to 17-year-olds than there is between 18 to 21-year-olds.
Seems unlikely, doesn't it? When you just think of your own life, or indeed of the teenagers in your life, the changes that you undergo between 17 and 21 are not quite as profound as the changes you undergo between 21 and 51. What about the taxation angle? The fact that 16-year-olds are not going to be engaged in income tax or the world of employment, with a few obvious exceptions. But should that compromise their franchise?
But they're going to have to pay tax.
Yeah, soon.
They're going to
very,
have to
very
pay tax
soon.
on the things for decisions that are made by the people.
Off the top of my head, Jenny, Nicaragua, Scotland, the Isle of Man, Guernsey, Ethiopia, Ecuador, Cuba, Brazil and Austria all let people vote at the age of 16, albeit that I don't think 16-year-old Scots can vote for the Westminster elections. They can just vote for the Holyrood ones. And then for 17-year-olds... There's another bunch of countries as well that have it at 17. Sudan, South Sudan, North Korea, Indonesia, Greece and East Timor. It's a funny old world.
Yeah, North Korea, interesting.
Yes, those votes possibly don't count for quite as much. Why, and you don't have to answer this, the second bit of the question, why are people like Cruddas, who got his seat in the House of Lords against the advice of the House of Lords Appointments Commission and subsequently gave £500,000 to the Conservative Party, why are they so worried about 16 and 17-year-olds getting the vote?
To be honest, I'm really not that bothered. Really not that sure.
No, perhaps we could ask him.
It must be because they are afraid that it is going to go to Labour. But the evidence is that people, 16, 17-year-olds, while some of them vote for the extremes, so the left wing and the right wing.
Both extremes.
Yeah, exactly. So he shouldn't be worried at all because it's the same trend as the 18 to 21. And in fact, the franchise of the more people vote between 16 and 17, then
the more engaged you get. So if you're in favour of this plan because you think it's going to deliver an epic boost to the Labour vote, then you're probably in for a little bit of disappointment. And if you're opposed to this plan because you think it's going to give an epic boost to the Labour vote, then you probably need to give your head a wobble. Either you're engaged with or in favour of maximum engagement by the electorate with the political landscape, with elections, or you're opposed to maximum engagement by the electorate with the political landscape. And why anyone would be opposed to enfranchisement or indeed democracy, I do not know. 26 minutes after 10. I'm just going to urge you not to waste 10 minutes getting yourself into Idiot's Corner this morning. If you want to say, well, you're not a fan of democracy, you oppose Brexit, then just have a look at what Brexit is doing. All right, have a look at all the people who voted for it, from Rocco Forte this morning, suggesting he's going to emigrate, despite being one of the only people in the hospitality sector who told you it would be a good idea. The thing that you voted for didn't exist. That's not democracy. That's delusion and deceit. And the people who did it, They graduated this weekend to telling you that if it wasn't for Brexit, Ukraine would have fallen to Vladimir Putin. That was Jacob Rees-Mogg's contribution to the national pageant from a position of now, frankly, comical desperation. Mary's in Crawley. Mary, what do you think?
Hi, James. Good morning.
Hello, Mary.
Hi, it's my first time calling. I was really angered by this. I've always listened in, but I never really felt the need to call. But
Okay, go on.
From my perspective, I just think it's a ploy by them. Whatever their scheme is or whatever is happening behind the scenes, they are clearly threatened by the idea of younger people being able to vote. And I was just saying to your colleague earlier, I do work in the hospitality sector and I do come across loads and loads of young people.
Yes.
And, having talked with them, they are well enabled. Some of them are still, they have so much wisdom, most of them more than most 40-year-olds you'd come across. So you'd hear them talk. They clearly want change. They want to be involved, be it in politics or whatever affects their lives. Yes, they're not paying taxes now, but they will soon pay taxes and they will soon get to that.
Some of them do. I mean, for a start, they pay VAT. And as you've just reminded us, in the hospitality sector, you can get a job after 16.
Absolutely.
Even if you're still in school, of course, you can get a job and you're paying tax, but you're not allowed to vote. This is where the American Revolution started, for goodness sake.
It's just ridiculous. And for me, I'm originally Nigerian, and I don't mean to be funny or put down my country, but it just reminds me of that plot when the government are threatened by this idea of younger people, having a voice and rising up to say something. Oh, we've got to find a way to shut them down, but we've got to do it in a way that doesn't look like we're being corrupt about it.
They may not even, as the last caller pointed out, it may not even make that much difference, but they're so desperate, these people.
But they're clearly threatened by that idea. So
yes.
There's clearly more to it,
Well, we shall see. Do you have a 16 or a 17-year-old in your life, Mary?
I do have a few, I have got a niece, but she's not that age yet. But I do have people that are family friends of similar ages. And like I said, they are very, very intelligent people. Not all 16-year-olds just want to go out and party and do whatnot. Yes, most of them do, but most of the ones I talk to, they also have a balance whereby they talk about live politics.
And we want them to. That's the other. Maybe they don't want people to be engaged in politics, because if people are engaged in politics, they would never have got Brexit.
Absolutely. I was never really engaged in politics. My dad was. I think my dad, he knew probably more about this country than most politicians that are running our country.
Keep them angry, keep them uninformed, and then they'll vote in the way that you want them to vote. And the younger they are, the less likely they are perhaps to fall for the tricks and the traps that you describe, especially in a country where people aren't buying newspapers anymore, and the decline in newspapers' influence accelerates as you head down the age range. I am genuinely struck by this Crudders character saying it out loud, though. The idea that you can't extend the vote to 16-year-olds or abolish voter ID, because that way we might not get the results that we want. And if you think that the country benefits from somebody who got a seat in the House of Lords after being found to have peddled influence and access to Conservative governments, wants for this country what you want, then I've got a bridge to sell you. Actually, I've got 3 bridges to sell you. That is just so utterly at odds with observable reality that I probably don't even need to point it out. It's 10:30 and Thomas Watts has your headlines. Here's another example of this fella's got a knighthood, and he gave £100,000 to the Conservative Party just before the last election through a 12-grand party for Boris Johnson when he became leader. This is a chap called Rocco Forte, whose father, Sir Charles, was a magnificent hotelier who set up the Trust House Forte empire. If Labour win, this is the Times newspaper today, which he thinks is likely, he may be upping sticks. Now, I quote this Forte fellow for you. Leaving the country is always a big step, but I am of Italian origin. I speak Italian. A large part of my business is in Italy, and if I was in Italy, I'd be able to expand quicker than I could sitting here. So it might be something to do anyway from a business point of view. All right? Same bloke, same interview, same paper, same page. Asked what benefits Brexit has delivered, he said, "We've joined the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which will eventually bear a lot of fruit because that part of the world is growing fast. There's a whole Remainer contingency saying, oh, we must get back into the European Union, as if the European Union was a great example of thriving economies. It's completely the opposite. Europe is in decline. Italy, for example, has had no new growth since it joined the euro. Germany now has had 2 years and 2 months of negative growth, which is a technical recession." Don't adjust your radio. This is the same bloke in the same interview speaking to the same newspaper about the same reality. Example number 1. I speak Italian. A large part of my business is in Italy. And if I was in Italy, I'd be able to expand quicker than I could sitting here. So it might be something to do anyway from a business point of view. Same bloke, same interview, same reality. Italy, for example, has had no new... One trying to justify his Brexit vote. He comes up with Italy, for example, has had no new growth since it joined the euro. Germany now has had 2 years and 2 months of negative growth, which is a technical recession. I don't even know how somebody can be that daft. Do you forget what you said 10 minutes ago? Did the interview go on for several days? And he said on Monday, I'm thinking of moving to Italy. And then he said on Friday, oh, Italy's awful. It's why I voted Brexit. Just think about that for a minute. This is a guy, I think it was his sister, who was also pro-Brexit and came out fairly shortly afterwards and said, oh, I can't get any votes. I can't get any staff anymore for my hotels. That's what we're doing. Cruddus is the winner today. Cruddus is the one who has said out loud, effectively, the reason that voter ID is such a good idea is it increases the Conservative vote share. Because if you haven't got voter ID, and 2 million people in this country haven't got it, then you're more likely to be someone who would vote against the interests of the kind of person that can give £500,000 in my case, or £100,000 in Rocco Forte's case, to the Tory party. 10:36 is the time. Francis is in Warminster in Wiltshire. Francis, what would you like to say?
Hello. I want to be slightly against the trend and say, no, I disagree with children voting because they are children until they reach the age of 18. And I think we should do everything we can to protect children until they have to take responsibility for life.
How is not letting them vote protecting them?
Because it's to do with the legal age of majority.
No, I just want to focus on the word protect, if I can.
Protect. So they're having to take responsibility for the government by voting. It's a very important thing that we do voting, and I think we take it too lightly.
They're allowed to join the army.
Only with parental permission.
Yeah.
So do they have to have parental permission to vote?
No, but they're allowed to join the army. We can't protect them if their parents say they can. Yes.
With parental permission.
No, but we can't protect them. So what if they've got feckless parents who sign them up for the army? You're saying we should protect children from being able to vote, but not from being able to join the army?
We should protect them from having to take responsibility.
Right.
We do it. Let's not focus on the army part.
Why not?
If you don't mind.
Why not?
Okay, I'm a recruiter for the army, so I would not like to discuss it.
They can have children. They can have children legally.
Yeah, they can have sex legally, yes. They can't marry legally.
They can have children.
Yes.
But we should protect them from voting.
Yeah. Are they allowed to have a credit card? Are they allowed to enter a contract? Legally, the age of majority is the age that you become
I know, I can count. I'm just why I'm focusing on the word protect. So we're comfortable with them joining the army and we're comfortable with them having children, but we don't think they're ready to vote.
I didn't say they weren't ready to vote. I'm just saying
we should protect them from voting.
We should protect their childhood.
What do you think is if you had to describe the damage that having the right to vote could do, what damage has it done to you, do you think?
I only vote when I'm an adult.
Yes, I know, but you haven't been protected from it anymore. So what damage does it do to a person when they can vote?
I'm not sure what the point is, James.
Okay, well,
sorry.
the verb protect involves insulating somebody or something from damage, right?
Yeah.
So what damage does the right to vote do? And because I can't expect you to speculate on what it might do to other people, even though you kind of are, I'm wondering what damage you think the right to vote has done to you.
What I'm saying, James, is that up until the age of 18, I have no legal responsibility.
You do if you have a baby.
Do you?
Or a gun.
Do you?
I think this is a fairly silly conversation, isn't it, now?
No. Can you have a gun when you're 17?
Let's try again then. Let's try again. What damage has the right to vote done to you that makes you think younger people need protecting from it?
I think it's a very big responsibility to choose.
No, you keep using these words,
government.
but I'm focusing on the words you started with, which is protect. So what damage does the right to vote do potentially to a 17-year-old?
It changes the age of their legal responsibility.
Okay. final time, what damage potentially does the right to vote do to a 17-year-old that we should all be protecting them from?
If we change the right to vote to 16,
The question's not complicated, is it? What is the damage that they need to be protected from?
James, it is complicated, and I'm sorry you're not really getting it.
Yeah, I am. That's exactly what people are taking away from this exchange, Francis.
Now, look, you've got children. What rights do you think they should have at 16 that they don't already have? Do you think they should have the right to vote?
Yes.
Do you think they can have a credit card?
If they've
Do you think they can get married?
If they pass the credit checks, they can get married with my permission. But you keep changing the subject.
Can't. The law changed in February to change that.
You keep well, my eldest is 17. You keep changing the subject.
Well, it's changed to 18, so she can't get married. She can't have a tattoo.
Married in January. I mean, what a ridiculous conversation. No wonder you're trying to change the subject. What is it that 17-year-olds need to be? And I'm not going to ask you again, so please pay my listeners the courtesy of answering the question that I'm asking you. What do they need to be protected from?
From being forced to be adults before they are 18.
Which is fair enough, Francis, but we probably could have worked this out before. Well, say it again then. They're being forced to be adults.
Children are children until they are 18
So they're going to be forced to vote, are they?
No.
So what are they being forced to do then?
To take legally binding decisions.
No, they don't have to vote.
Okay, fine. I just think children should be protected from
voting. What about driving?
Driving, they can drive at 17.
Yeah, what about that then? Shouldn't we be protecting them from road traffic accidents?
Well, possibly. Well, we should be protecting them from road traffic.
Have a great day. Colin's in Glasgow. Colin, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. I just wanted to say it's so refreshing hearing your points of view.
I'll tell you what, Colin, I think there's quite a strong case for taking the vote away from some adults, let alone giving it to some teenagers.
You have literally hit it on the head there. What I explained to your producer just before I came on is I stay in Scotland. I was 18 by the point the law changed in Scotland that allowed 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote. But what needs to be reminded is just because someone is given the right to vote, whether they're 16, 17 or 68, they're not forced to vote. It's it's putting it into their hands.
In the spirit of arguing with everybody, I'm not entirely opposed to the idea of compulsory voting. Actually, they have it in Australia, don't they? I think it does something to the franchise.
100%, and I think it is everyone's the democratic right to vote. I mean, during the sort of first hour of listening this morning before yourself, there was a few callers that was like, oh my goodness, it's these young people, the earth is going to implode on us. What is the worst thing about...
I've got a tenor says they think Shamima Begum was entirely responsible for her actions when she went to Syria at the age of 15, but I didn't hear the calls you refer to, so it would perhaps be a little unfair to speculate. What should we be frightened of? What should we be worried about, do you think, on this? Apart from Lord Cruddas accidentally saying that it's a way of increasing the franchise or increasing democracy. What are they truly frightened of?
I mean, I think he's been very truthful there, but on the other side of it, I think there's this fear that there is young people who a lot of older voters may view as incapable or too immature. But, in my final years of high school, we had involvement in the Scottish Youth Parliament,
of course, yeah.
But modern studies, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But it is exciting. And, I mean, I know a lot of 17, 18-year-olds who thrive on that, the opportunity to finally get their voice put forward.
I'm trying to see the downside. I mean, I think you highlight many of the upsides. I'm genuinely trying to see the downside. Apart from you should be, as a 17-year-old, you should be protected from the right to vote, which I think we can all agree we didn't buy that. No, we didn't really nail that down.
No, I don't buy that. I think what one caller made, which I can understand, is that some people can be swayed. But having said that, there's some adults who can also be just as easily, swayed into fake news or dodgy policies. It is a two-way road. But that is the sort of beauty of democracy. That there's always going to be more than one side.
I think the age.
But there's no. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
No, I was interrupting you. You carry on.
I just don't think there's anything. It isn't going to be Armageddon when 16 and 17-year-olds who are interested and who want to put their view forward Of course, you'll get
are able and able and entitled to do so. I mean, unless there's some sort of weird population spike and we suddenly get a completely disproportionate number of 16, 17 and 18-year-old. Maybe if we'd won Eurovision on Saturday night, then 16 years from now there'd be or 16 years plus 9 months from now there'd be a whole new generation of people that could skew an election. I think the age of criminal responsibility in England and Wales, I can't remember what it is in Scotland, Colin, I think it's 10. So you want to talk about responsibility. You can't have the vote, but you can definitely get arrested. It is 10:45. It's not even what we thought it was, is it? Because you're going to have to be the right age to vote. So 16, if you're 16 or 17 now, chances are you're going to be 18 by the time there's a general election anyway. So it's because they only come around every 4 or 5 years usually. It's such a tiny constituency. Do you see what I mean? It's like the target moves and the sort of number of people it affects is not 5 years worth of 16 and 17-year-olds. It's 1 year's worth of 16 and 17-year-olds, if that makes sense, and it probably doesn't. And the more we talk about it, the more I think that the bigger story possibly, is this weird new fringe of very right-wing Tories who find Rishi Sunak too left-wing. Could you imagine looking at Rishi Sunak's policies on immigration in particular, or refugees, thinking, oh, he's too soft, this guy, too left-wing. I do wonder whether the problem is actually that he's from an ethnic minority himself. There were suggestions that a large part of Liz Truss's victory in the Conservative leadership election had to do with ethnicity rather than policy. Because remember, that's a vote by the Conservative Party membership, which has sort of become increasingly UKIPified in recent years. But there it is. I mean, this Crudders character saying out loud that we got to keep the voter ID laws in, because if we don't, more people might vote. Ben's in Harrogate. Ben, what would you like to say?
Hello. I just wanted to, first of all, start off by thanking you for having our corner this morning.
You're very welcome.
I'm 23, and particularly at the time of the EU referendum, I was 16, so I wasn't able to vote. And it was probably one of the most frustrating things.
I can only imagine,
and then
actually.
Again, in 2017...
It was pretty frustrating when you could vote, Ben, so
well, that was something else I was going to say, was that, even when we do have the opportunity to vote right now, often, it's factual. We don't really have any power with our vote. Our vote is so minor and so small in comparison to other generations, like the silent generation and the boomers, that it feels as though our future is being decided for us by generations that aren't going to be a part of that future because they think they know what's best.
You would think if anything was going to give that generation pause, the generation of Peter Crudders and Rocco Forte, the second of whom is thinking of emigrating because the Brexit he supported has gone so badly, you'd think, wouldn't you, that generation might pause and think, do you know what? Maybe we should let the young people have a go for a while, or at least let them get a finger on the steering wheel, because we've just driven them off a cliff.
Yeah, it was a strange time. My high school, they do mock elections. I imagine probably a lot of schools did that, and probably still do. And in the EU referendum, I think it was like 80% Remain. And in 2017 general election, mock election we did, each year group elected an MP, and it was a Labour landslide. So it kind of says a lot about the differences in opinions. And I think the difference, not that our entire generation is full of left-wing people. It's not. It's just as diverse as any other generation. I think the difference is that I'm not going to say we're more aware than other generations, but we walk around with a virtual encyclopedia with us all day, every day. And I think the idea that young people just purely use their phones and electronic devices for mindless entertainment isn't true. I think a lot of
there's a level of engagement, a level of being informed. I mean, there's a danger of echo chambers, I suppose, but better an echo chamber than a blindfold. I hadn't thought of it like that, and of course we haven't used the word woke yet today. So a large part of the fear.
Something I was going to say is we are often, I was listening to BBC Radio 5, sorry.
That's all right.
I probably shouldn't say that earlier this morning. And it was a talk about immigration, immigrant labour and things. And the main topic that everybody was talking about, and most of the people that were on there were 30 and up, were basically saying that this new generation of people, i.e. my generation, are lazy. That we don't want to go out and work in these physical jobs, that we don't want to go out and do these manual jobs that require more effort. And I just think this whole negative
I shouldn't laugh, but it's like, you know...
No, it is. It's
talk
funny,
about
it's
being
like,
stuck.
I don't understand. You know,
you get out there and do a job I wouldn't do in a million years, you lazy fat. And you know why you can't afford a house? You know why you can't afford a house, don't you, Ben?
I'm too lazy.
Too many avocados. Too many. Just put down the avocados on toast, and you could be living in your own home by tea time. Oh, unbelievable! But what's the appeal of that from your perspective as a 23-year-old when you hear older people saying things that are just stupid? And there may be some older people you love who subscribe to these schools of thought. They can be, I don't know. Is it comforting? Is it when you've got a complicated problem? Does a simplistic pseudo solution actually offer some sort of comfort?
I don't think really. I think the idea that there's any simple solution to any of the problems that face not just my generation, but everybody in this country is wrong. I think, you know, it's too simple just to say if you can't afford a house, for instance, just go out and get a better job. Yeah. That tends to be what I hear from the right a lot. They should just go out and get a better job. And they don't look at the finer details of these things a little bit more.
It's structural inequality, isn't it? If you can't just go out and get a better job, then there must be structural inequality, and we can't possibly admit there's structural inequality because this is the land that we built. This is exactly what we wanted.
This is it. This is it. And particularly with like the democracy thing, and giving 16, 17-year-olds the right to vote, I think personally it's really important. As points you made before, you know, they can pay tax, they can go and enlist in the military, they can have a baby, they can get married,
they can be locked up, they can, I mean, there's all sorts of things. They can ride a moped on the I think at 16. I hear you, Ben, but I am still open to suggestions of what it is precisely that they need to be protected from. Ben, thank you. 10:55 is the time. Andrea is in Huntley. Andrea, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Andrea.
First-time caller,
well,
so
welcome.
apologies
what took
if I
you so
sound
long? What took you so long? I've been here nearly 20 years. Someone told me in an interview last week.
That long? Goodness.
I know. That's incredible. Carry on. Well, what made you pick up the phone? What made you break your duck?
Well, I have two grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren, but 2 are of voting age in Scotland. One is nearly 17 and one is 20. And the political awareness that these young people have makes so much difference. It is their future they're voting for. And we discuss things, we argue about things that my own children, who grew up here in Scotland, at 16 and 17, I don't know, they were just interested in their own lives. They weren't interested in what was going on in the bigger world. But my grandchildren, because they have the choice to vote, they do vote, and
that made a
so
big difference
to them.
I think there's probably a bit of complacency as well in that I wonder if I'm closer to your children's age. I probably am, aren't I? Is that just sort of thinking generationally? If you've got 16, 17-year-old grandchildren, my kids are around the same age.
I'm 66.
So you're 15 years older than me, okay. I'm not quite their generation, but we lived in calmer times. Certainly before the financial crisis of 2008, there was less reason to be politically engaged, perhaps, than there is now. You look around now and you think, what the hell have these people done?
Well, they're destroying us.
Iraq was a big Iraq was a big thing. But looking at in terms of the domestic situation, I think they would be furious.
I suppose yes. I suppose things were calmer when my children were that age, but I like the fact that my grandchildren discuss Brexit, discuss government choices, discuss dishonesty and...
Well, I think we know why they don't want them to, don't we? We know why they don't want them to have the
vote.
vote.
Absolutely.
They're going to vote with one eye on the road ahead and one eye on the road behind, and it is probably more likely that they're going to vote to get rid of the people who put people like Peter Cruddas in the House of Lords, despite the fact that the House of Lords Appointments Commission unanimously advised Boris Johnson not to do it. They're probably not going to vote for that kind of party, are they?
Well, I hope not. I truly hope not.
Well, of course, because there is no guarantee. Who knows what they've raised? You can pass the buck on to your children if they have raised little. Well, anyway, we shall see. But you remind us that there is no guarantee. So what are they frightened of? To make the arguments to the 17-year-olds, persuade them that your way is the right way, that your policies are the best policies. Why are you so frightened of them voting for the other people if you've got such a great set of policies? Go on, tell them why we should be locking up refugees or deporting them to Rwanda. Explain it in a cool and calm and compassionate way, and they'll bite your arm off, won't they, Suella? James is in Scarborough. Last word on this, but we may stay on a similar theme moving forward. James, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Yeah, so I'm a youth worker, and my job's to engage young people to have voice in democracy. And the one time of year in the House of Commons that isn't an absurd circus, that has a compassion and care for each other's views and respect, is when the members of Youth Parliament sit there. And to say that, that young people aren't engaged, every single kind of movement in the last 200 years that's created social change has been generated by the young people's movement of that age group. So, the woke movement
I might challenge that. Now, every single social movement of the last 200 years has come from the young.
Well, not all of them, but
a lot of them. I'll give you a lot of them, or I'll give you most or many, but you can't have all of them. I mean, I don't know that the suffragists were particularly youthful in their motivation or their membership, and apartheid. I think that had quite a lot to do with older people. Poor old Nelson had been in prison for decades. I'm teasing you a bit. I'm just teasing.
The leaders, yes. The leaders may be more.
But you need the young on your side to make meaningful change, probably.
Absolutely, and they're the driving force. They're the people setting up the campaigns. The Black Power movement in America. Yep. Black Lives Matter, the woke movement in modern times have all been mainly the young people driving force behind that. Today, I'm about to set off to speak to two groups of special needs young people to see how we can change the services better, and we get more from them than we do kind of any adult.
It's a belief in the possibility of change, James. That's what you've just crystallised for me. Whereas the older we get, perhaps, the more susceptible we are to cynicism and exhaustion.
I think so. And just that still in the place of, I think young people are in that place of turning into an adult and wanting to express, wanting to have their voice heard. And we can't expect young people to be as interested in politics unless they have the vote. It's chicken and egg, isn't it?
I think you and the last caller really sort of as a pincer movement pin that point down, as you will be more engaged if you have skin in the game, if you have a dog in the race. And why would people not want you to have skin in the game? Why would anybody not want you to have the right to vote in a country that you are intending to spend the rest of your life living in? 11:01 is the time. 5 minutes after 11 is the time, and we move now to the second part of some proposals being considered by Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, and it falls to me, I think, to correct some of the coverage. The Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph are desperate to get the word EU into this story, and while it's not technically inaccurate, it is certainly misleading, because the proposal would involve, I think, anybody with settled status being able to vote in UK elections. As he told Nick Ferrari earlier today, that would be people who, in many cases, have lived here for decades. I mean, before Brexit, you might not have bothered getting settled status because you didn't think that the country you call home would ever embark upon such an insane act of self-sabotage. But hey-ho, you live and learn, and now you've got yourself settled status and you are keen to have a say in the direction of the country where you have paid quite possibly tens of thousands of pounds in tax. The reason I'm doing both topics rather than knitting them both together is that for me at the moment, and I may be dissuaded from this position by your calls, actually, it does often happen, although certainly not always, I may change my mind, but at the moment for me they seem like two very, very different proposals. I can see why you'd want to file them together. Tories are so frightened of foreigners and young people that they think giving foreign-born people and young people the vote will be bad news for the Tories. So in that kind of weird Peter Cruddas worldview, then you would lump them both together. The figure on voter ID, by the way, is, I mean, there's been one estimate of it by an organisation that sent observers to as many councils as they could, but it's far from exhaustive. They've put the figure at about 1.2% of voters turned away for lacking ID, just over half of whom were observed to be from ethnic minorities, i.e. appearing to be non-white. The group also said that its team saw others being allowed to vote despite not having the ID. So, I mean, make of that what you will. But you've got a 1.2% failure there, withdrawal of vote, robbing, stealing of votes, which a particular type of Tory is so happy about that they've even taken to saying out loud that it would be terrible if Labour gave those votes back to people who don't have photo ID. But I think the proposal with regards to settled status is different, and that's why we're going to talk about it from a slightly different angle. I'm going to start, if I may, with a what's it like. as opposed to, why don't you think foreigners should have the same rights as you? I think that worldview has probably run its course in civilised conversation. I appreciate it'll still be on Question Time, and it'll still be represented very prominently by the likes of Farage and Rees-Mogg. But why foreigners should have fewer rights than you is kind of a baby step towards fascism. So it's a more interesting conversation than that, because it doesn't immediately happen in other countries. British people living abroad don't automatically get votes in other countries' elections. It varies from country to country. I don't apologise for not having all the facts at my fingertips. It's too hard to pin down. I presume there are distinctions for EU membership as well, are there? There'll be some EU countries where other EU members get a vote, but if you lived there from a non-EU country, do you see what I mean? I just don't know enough. But frankly, I don't care, because one of the great benefits of Brexit, remember, is that we can make our own rules now. We don't have to follow anybody else. We don't have to do what anybody else. Why would we care what Germany does? We are Britain. We are sovereign. Rule Britannia. Britannia waves. Britannia makes the rules. So I don't think that rhetorical device is going to deliver much by way of substantive advantage. So, well, why should we do? Why should we? They're not doing it. But that's the whole point of Brexit, wasn't it? That we could do things that they don't do. No. I mean, we could have done it while in the European Union, of course. But hey ho. So, what's it like to live in a country where you can't vote? 0345 6060 973. I just wonder how much it bothers you. I wonder, because the point for me where these two stories actually intersect is on the question of engagement. So the most powerful contributors in the last hour were the people persuading us that having the vote, extending the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds immediately extends engagement. What do you want from an electorate? If you want the best for your country, you want an engaged electorate. If you want the best for your sponsors, your donors, your vested interests, you want a disengaged electorate. That's not an opinion, that's counting. If you want the best for ordinary people in this country, you want an engaged electorate. The more people are engaged, the better the country will become by dint of the politicians that are put into power. The less engaged or the more misinformed an electorate is, then if what you want is a country designed to enhance and increase the benefits for people like you and your sponsors, for you, whether it's big business or vested interests or capital, wealth, call it what you will, then the last thing you want is an engaged electorate, because why would anybody vote to increase inequality or vote to be on the wrong end of injustice? Throw in a little bit of race baiting, a little bit of anti-refugee rhetoric, and you can successfully get people to vote against their own interests. But the more attention they're paying and the more of them there are, and the more people are dedicated to actually telling them the truth rather than flogging them snake oil and xenophobia, then the less likely it is for the kind of people who can afford to give £500,000 to the Tory party to get a government that will act in their interests rather than the interests of people who can't afford to give £500,000 to the Tory party. So I get the engagement question, but you have no choice but to be disengaged. If you haven't applied for citizenship, if you have just got settled status, if you've been here pretty much all of your adult life. So just talk to me about the effects and the impact. What does it do to you? Do you step back from the fray, or do you stare goggle-eyed at the national pageant and curse yourself for not having, or curse the gods of psephology for not having any say in the processes that affect you so profoundly? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Marlemka is in Leeds. Marlemka, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I listen to you all the time, and actually today it hit hard what you're talking about, because at the time of Brexit vote elections, many years ago, I'm from Poland, by the way, and I've been living here for about more than 16 years. I studied here, got a house, mortgage, everything, family. Yes. And at the time of the day of the elections, I walked into the polling station ready to vote, because obviously it's a matter really close to my heart, being from Poland and living here and, being a foreigner. And a lady who was checking your name said to me, "Oh, I'm really sorry, you can't vote. You are a foreigner," really out loud in the quiet room. And that I actually left in tears, thinking, well, why is it...
You're a second-class citizen. You're a second-class member of society.
Absolutely. Even though I do pay taxes,
Yeah, of course.
I do everything. I don't have citizenship because, quite frankly,
Didn't
it's
need
a £1,600 expense.
It's for sale, of course. I forgot that. It's for sale.
Yes. Yes.
Dear.
For one test and a passport.
A passport that's worth considerably less now than your Polish passport is when it comes to the countries you can move freely in between, for heaven's sake.
Exactly. And you said, what is it like? It's life-changing, if I'm honest, because, at the time, sort of before Brexit, my family, my mum and dad thought maybe we can move to UK and live, with me or sort of here with grandchildren. They can't do it now, or basically they're doing everything to make it difficult for us to do it. So obviously we sort of gave up. But it is life-changing. We see each other 3 times a year.
Oh, so it's affected your family life as well as your sense of belonging in a way in this country.
Yes.
What can you vote in? Do you know what vote? Because I'm just a bit dozy on this one.
Honestly, I don't know. No. I've lost faith, and I don't vote anymore. Maybe I should, but I really don't know if I turn up.
But what elections can you do? You don't. Neither of us know. What have you voted on in the past? Can you remember?
Probably like the local elections.
Local elections. Yeah, that rings a bell with me.
Nothing major.
No, but if you're paying council tax, you get a vote in council elections, you would imagine. So if you're paying income tax, you should get a vote in national elections, shouldn't you?
There you go. Yeah.
Seems quite straightforward. Why do you think they don't want you to vote, Marlemka?
Well, because simply we would say yes to Brexit, no to Brexit, and
it's too late
yes
for
to
that.
European Union. Yeah, exactly.
Well, at least Rocco Forte, you can move to continental Europe. Poland's economy is supposed to overtake Britain's by 2030. I was reading recently.
But there's lots of other issues there. I don't think I could go there.
No. Well, we don't want you to. You've also got what I call, this will mean absolutely nothing to you, Marlemka, but given that I have referred on a couple of occasions today to Kidderminster Harriers, you have what I call the Jan Molby effect in action, which means although I can detect your Polish accent very clearly when you talk to me, I can also detect a fat slice of Leeds as well, and I think that's lovely.
Yeah, it's my Yorkshire husband's fault.
It's a proper mix. It's a proper mix. It's a proper mix is what it is.
Thank you.
It fills my heart with joy. That for me is a mark of a modern, forward-facing country ready to face all the challenges of the 21st century. And that, of course, is the country that we lived in until that day when you discovered you weren't allowed to vote because you were a second-class resident of this country, as it would appear people like Peter Cruddas are keen to keep you that way. It is 11:15. The number you need is 0344. Well, actually, the phones are a bit full, but if you're quick, you can grab Marlemka's line. It's 10:15. 19 minutes after 11, a little addendum to the last hour. It's worth remembering that even once children become 18 and are old enough to vote, old enough to marry, old enough to join the army, old enough to die for their country, under the current student finance system, they are not independent. The amount of maintenance loan they get to go to university is dictated by an assessment of family income, which is, of course, a proxy for parental income, even though there is no way for a child to force their parents to give them the parental contribution that is explicit in the system. I know that's accurate because it's a message from Martin Lewis, who is the world authority on such matters, so I can state that with complete confidence. Speaking of confidence, I'm hearing very, very strange reports from Kidderminster. Apparently, the Kidderminster Harriers squad is still celebrating in the dressing room at Agbra, despite the fact that they got back to Kidderminster after beating Brackley Town in the final of the National League North playoff final at 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So I can now cross live to the dressing room just to see whether that is true. Yeah, I don't think... I'm not going to get any interviews yet, so that's nearly 24 hours and counting that they're still giving it some. I'll check in a little bit later, see if anyone's able to talk to me. But the question we're asking at the moment is, what's it like to live here and have absolutely no say in government or politics on a national level? Laurent is in Wimbledon. Laurent, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, thank God someone is speaking about this on the radio, because since 2016, it felt like we'd been put on a notice step, basically. Yes. As I've been here for 1986. So make calculate 37 years, something like this.
Yes.
Actually, in 2 weeks.
Most of my life, actually, Laurent, you've been here.
When I arrived from France after my national service, and I was a pastry chef, and I arrived in London to cook in the best places. I was luckily picked up by Trust House Forte, and then I went in all kinds of... But
go on.
We had when we arrived in this country, we have that freedom, we have that possibility to do something in Europe and in England. I chose England, and but in 2016 everything changed, and we felt like strangled. But in the same time, we still had the difficulty of not being able to speak our thoughts and our voices. And as the lady who said before, the only way for us to vote was via the local elections.
Yes. I needed to clarify that. That's a council tax sort of trade, isn't it?
Yeah.
You pay your council tax. Of course, you get a say on how you vote in there.
Which is fantastic in a way, because I never missed one. So if I was the possibility to vote for the general election, I will be there as in one place, because I lost 2 businesses during the 2008 crisis.
Oh, okay, yes.
I suffered to go back on my feet. I created a new limited company this year again,
yes.
And I'm participating in this country.
And you have been doing for 37 years. Could we even begin to estimate how much tax you might have paid during that period, either income or corporate?
Well, I'll give my accountant telephone number if you want to send.
But quite a lot, we could say, with some confidence.
Well, yeah. I mean, I work semi-self-employed and employed, and now since 2002, fully self-employed. So yes, I did spend a lot of money. And now I have to pay VAT on top of all that. So obviously I'm growing, but it's.
And you're not allowed to have a say. It is odd, isn't it? And I think on this programme, at least, we can ignore the people who would respond by saying, "Well, if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else," because at least you can with your French passport. But just remind me what the rules are for dual nationality. Could you have applied for British citizenship at some point?
Yes.
Or would you have to give up your French citizenship in order to do that, or can you have both?
Oh no. No. I could have both.
But why should you?
I'm stubbornly. I mean, going through the passports and flying. Having the European passport, I'm sorry to say, but it's the best, because I don't have any issues. I pass through. Okay,
no, I know that. Well, you don't have to be sorry to say it. I'm just pointing out, I suppose, because I have to, that you could apply for a British passport, albeit that you'd have to jump through several hoops and get the money, and then you'd have a vote, I think, in British general elections. But why would we have to bring in such a strange rule when you're paying income tax? No taxation without representation, and you have no representation.
But also, I have to pay £2,500 to get a British citizen. So I don't think.
Is it £2,500 now?
Shall I choose? Is he worth? I'm sure he's worth, because on top of that, I'm scared of being close to the. Well, I'm in my mid-50s now, so another 10 years before retirement. What's going to happen? Do I need to get a British citizen to get my retirement money on a regular properly?
I wouldn't have thought so. But again, that's another reason to call your accountant, Laura, just to make sure.
Another reason why I need to say something. We need to, be there. We had a really strong representation here, and there's a company, a group of people where they call themselves the 3 million.
Yes.
And then the European. They have been absolutely amazing representing us here in the UK, and they're the one who really pushed this voting thing. And I don't think we speak about them enough, but I think if Mr. Labour,
Starmer,
I've been talking. Starmer, that's the one. I've been talking about it. It's possibly because he might have heard or spoke to those guys. But you know what? It was such a surprise to hear him saying that, I would never believe that it will happen one day. I just, you kind of give up. You're like, well,
you can. If you were a Commonwealth citizen, oddly, you would be able to vote. They don't mention this in the Daily Mail coverage. If you were a Commonwealth citizen, you could, as long as you fulfilled the age and residence requirements, I think you would be able to.
Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, and you can't register as an overseas elector, obviously. So if you were still living overseas, you couldn't. But I think if a person is a qualifying Commonwealth citizen, if they do not require leave to enter or remain in the UK, or they do require leave to enter or remain in the UK, but have been granted such leave or are treated as having been granted such leave. So so you're in the hierarchy of residency, you're below them.
Well, yeah, but that's how you feel. That's the problem.
I know it is.
Like I said, you feel like you're in a kind of, you're in a cage. You're naughty. You're not. I can't say what I need to say. I can't vote when it's.
Yeah, well, that's deliberate. I think you're supposed to feel second class because people like Jacob Rees-Mogg think that you are. But people like me do not, Laurent. People like me and most people listening to this programme categorically do not.
Thank you very much.
Did you listen to my full disclosure interview with Fred Syriax?
No, I didn't. No,
you have similar stories, and I think you'd enjoy it. I think he came here straight from catering college, actually, as well. I think you would enjoy that. You've led similar lives.
Right, okay.
So have a little listen to that. I presume your daughter isn't an Olympic medal-winning diver, though, like his.
No.
Well, the night is young. Laurent, merci. 11:27 is the time. John's in Wandsworth. John, what would you like to say?
I just wanted to comment about the issues regarding voting.
Yes.
I'm Australian. I've been able to vote in council elections, but I haven't been able to vote at national election or federal or what it is. So there is a difference there as well. But yeah,
I thought you could. I'm going to have messed up this Commonwealth thing now, aren't I? I thought if you were in the Commonwealth, you could vote in general elections.
You may be right. All I know is I've been turned away.
Well, it might be your residency status or something like that.
Yeah, that's ultimately that's what it's come down to. So, but I can vote in council elections because I am a Commonwealth citizen.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think the motivation is for not letting you vote in a general election, even though I presume I'm never that comfortable with saying because you pay tax here. Because if you were poorly, everyone's paying VAT, of course, but income tax, it shouldn't necessarily be the be all and the end all of the qualification.
Well, I think we make a contribution to society, and I think the line of work that I do, I make a very healthy contribution to society, and I pay taxes, as I'm required to do, and I'm quite happy to do that.
Of course.
I must admit, even myself, I get chills sometimes when I listen to Braverman and some of the things that she comes up with, and I think, well, that could be me. So that's how I feel at the moment. But I know it's not the same for Brits going to Australia, so I don't understand why it's different. But anyway,
if I move to Australia, I get a vote in Australian elections, do I?
I think so.
I'm not sure. Which this is what I mean. I mean, it doesn't actually matter because. This is Brexit Britain. We can do what we want. We make our own rules. But I just, out of curiosity, I am intrigued by what the balances are, what the differences are.
Well, Australia is very different because it's compulsory to vote there.
Of course it is.
Well.
Yeah.
And they're looking at allowing 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds to vote as well.
Are they really? They're considering it too. And people often point at Australia, people like Braverman often point at Australia, some recent Australian policies regarding, for example, immigration as being a shining example. So, we could read into that what you will. John, thank you. It's coming up to 11:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. He mentioned Braverman. She's given some press releases which the Times have sadly, and the Telegraph today have sadly put straight onto their front pages. I'm making a conscious effort not to talk about Suella Braverman's press releases that papers like the Times and the Telegraph put straight onto their front pages without any scrutiny or proper analysis. But I should probably explain why I'm trying to do that and what is happening when Suella Braverman's press releases get put straight onto the front pages of the Times. And the bloke that edits the Times now has already edited the Telegraph and the Sun. Did you know that? Did you know that? Did you know that? the bloke that edits the Times now, has already edited the Telegraph and the Sun. So I need to keep checking that this stuff is shocking, because it's all in the new book, right? And I keep doing these things where I go, I knew that, but I still can't. But hey, and also, you think I'm joking, he's also been deputy editor of the Daily Mail. Same bloke. But remember, the new elites in this country are Carol Vorderman, Gary Lineker, and me. It's 11:30, and Thomas Watts has your headlines. 11:34 is the time. Just checking to see if anyone at the National League North promotion winners, Kidderminster Harriers, is ready to talk to me on a top interview. They got back to the ground in Kidderminster at about 9:25 last night. I'm told they haven't stopped celebrating yet, but I'm presuming somebody will just be able to have a quick word with me now. You'd think, this is national radio, lads. It's a big show. No? All right, then. We'll try again later. 11:55 is the time. Back to the question of what it's like to live here, work here, pay taxes here, love here, raise a family here, but not be able to vote here. I like this from Edith, who's in Chatham. She says, I am French. I came from France in the late 1970s. I married in 1980. I took my husband's British nationality while retaining mine. It was given to me without today's exorbitant fees and without a test. I gave my children the dual nationality and they gave it to their children. We are all able to vote here and in France if we wished to. I feel anger and despair about Brexit and the fact that people with settled status cannot vote. Of course you do. But why are they so desperate to keep it this way? Seems to me, genuinely, and I know it's made the Daily Mail's front page today, I wonder whether they didn't get the press release from Suella Braverman that the Telegraph and the Times have just put straight on their front pages without any analysis or scrutiny. The Daily Mail are accusing Keir Starmer of trying to reverse the Brexit vote, which is obviously bonkers, but why would they not want people like Laurent to have a vote? Or Malemka to have a vote. It just seems very strange if you are a great believer in democracy. Unless you're racist, I suppose. That could be one answer. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying that unless you think foreigners are somehow inferior or less valid human beings, but that would be fascistic. Shane is in Leeds. Shane, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm sorry I'm not Kidderminster Harriers.
That's all right, mate. You'd think they'd have made an out. After all I've done for them this season, you'd have thought they'd be able to put someone up for a quick interview, wouldn't you? Honestly.
You would.
What made you pick up the phone?
I'm not an EU citizen. I'm a non-EU citizen.
Yes.
And
so am I now. Don't rub it in. Callers, so am I.
Yeah. Unlike your other callers, I can't vote in anything. Oh. I can't vote in council elections. I can't vote in the national elections or anything. In fact, yeah. Because I'm not a Commonwealth citizen either.
Where are you from?
I'm from Thailand.
Okay. And what is your status? I hate that question. That's a post-Brexit question. Yeah. It makes me feel like something out of The Great Escape. But show me your papers. What is your status?
I have indefinite leave to remain, which is different from settled status.
So if you had settled status, you'd get a vote under these proposals. You wouldn't have to be an EU citizen.
Correct, yes. But non-EU citizens don't. Their status when they've been given, the right to remain here indefinitely is considered different to settled status. And these proposals, as far as I can tell, are only talking about EU citizens who've had settled status.
I have got a message from. Hang on, I think I might be able to help you here. I've got a message from the CEO of the Migrant Democracy Project and the manager of Polish migrants. I appreciate that's an EU country, but Dr. Alex Bulat was in touch with me before I came on air this morning, and this might be encouraging for you. Hi, James. I'm not sure if you're covering the headlines from yesterday. Labour give their national policy. It does not the National Policy Forum documents that Labour are referencing do not single out EU citizens. In fact, the policy, when detailed, could actually be more progressive than Starmer's pledge. I am the co-director of the Migrant Democracy Project, and we have been campaigning for residence-based voting rights, like in Scotland and Wales, since 2020. And their press release this morning does clarify some of the issues on what, in their view, is a very unhelpful framing of the issue. So I think there's some good news for you here, actually.
That would be really good, because not being able to vote in anything gives you the feeling that you're not being represented.
Of course it does.
When I have to deal with I've dealt with my MP, who happens to be the Shadow Chancellor, and because you don't vote, you can't vote for these people because you have nothing to offer them. They're not really that interested. I've had instances where I've dealt with the Home Office and said, "Oh, I'm not a British citizen," and I've had the phone put down on me.
Really?
Yes.
Because they're not. You're not their responsibility. They would say, I suppose. Yeah. So I thought you got. I thought you could pay. I thought if you paid council tax, you got a vote in local elections.
Nope. I'm afraid not.
You've checked, have you?
You can't even. I've checked. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's a multi-tiered hierarchy, isn't it? And may I ask how long you've lived here? You don't have to tell me. I'm just intrigued.
30 years. 30 years. I've run businesses. I've employed people. I've done all the things that a British citizen would have done, and yet I can't choose who represents me.
It is remarkable. So what they're doing, what this organisation, you should look them up. Actually, the Migrant Democracy Project, they are campaigning for everybody. It's not clear what Labour are proposing or not at the moment. So I need to clarify my earlier clarification. We hope that the proposal is for all migrants with settled status or indefinite leave to remain to have the right to vote in general elections. So that you need to get on there, get on that team. I think, Shane, don't you?
Yeah, I think the last figures I saw, there were about 3 million of us.
Yeah.
So.
And do you think, as you're a businessman, you are not by definition more likely to vote in one way or the other? But do you think that part of the reluctance of people like Peter Cruthers to see people like you get the vote is down to a perception that you're more likely to vote for the Labour Party than the Tory Party?
I think ethnic minorities are perceived as being more likely to vote for Labour. I mean, 10 years ago, I would have voted Conservative. I wouldn't do that now.
No, but that's got nothing to do with your ethnicity. I know that you've done the research, but I am getting a few messages through saying, Ken is from Malaysia. I have indefinite leave to remain. I can and do vote in both the local and general elections. So I don't know.
He might have dual nationality.
I think he'd have mentioned it if he did.
He
wouldn't need it, would he?
But I have checked the.
All right.
I've certainly never got, any polling, any sort of electoral things through the post.
No, I don't know.
To the website.
Well, he might. I don't know. Well, that's worth speaking to that organisation anyway, isn't it, to find out whether or not you possibly have more rights currently than you thought you did, albeit that you don't have the same rights as me, despite having worked here for 30 years. It's crazy. 11:42 is the time. Listen, you are welcome to object to this, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't sound as if you're simply saying, I don't like foreigners. I appreciate there's plenty of people who don't like foreigners. You are the reason why we are currently the lowest performing economy in the G7. You are the reason why we are currently the only population in the history of humanity to have imposed economic sanctions on itself. You are the reason why many of our friends and neighbours and loved ones feel less welcome in this country than they did in 2016, although I fully appreciate that's exactly what you wanted. But I just know your reason for not wanting them to have the vote if you're from that school of thought. If you've got anything a little bit more original or intelligent to offer as a reason why people like Shane and Malemka and Laurent shouldn't have a vote in general elections, I would love to hear it. But simply not liking, there are so many radio phone-in shows where you can get on air simply by not liking foreigners. Okay, maybe not quite as many as there used to be, but there are still plenty. This is not one of them. All right, unless you're clever enough to offer up something else while pretending that you don't. That you're not simply offering up a dislike of foreigners. That's always fun. Let's see how you get on. Enrique is in East Preston. Enrique, what would you like to say?
Well, what I would like to say is that congratulations. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Oh,
congratulations on killing Mr. Harriet.
Yeah, thank you. You'd think they'd talk to me, wouldn't you, Enrique? Can't believe it. Still partying, apparently. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, terrible. And I hope that Keir Starmer gets through and he actually pushes through this law, because I have lived here since 1967, permanent status from 1969, when I got married to a lady here. I have worked in the NHS all my life, I have worked at the Royal Master in Sutton, and I have paid my taxes duly. I've been retired now for 10 years.
Yes.
And my children, I have 4 children, they're all British. My wife is British. So when we go through passport control, they go one way and I go another because I still have a Spanish passport.
Wow.
So I never understood why I couldn't vote since I pay taxes.
No, I mean, it wouldn't have made news, would it, in previous eras? I think Brexit has focused the mind on this question of hierarchy, but it does seem ridiculous that you could live here for pretty much your entire life and not have any say whatsoever in how the people that you pay your taxes to spend the money, Enrique.
Well, I love this country, James. I mean, I lived here all my life, as I say. And when I go to Spain, I go back to Malaga, where I come from.
Yes.
They always call me the Guiri. The Guiri is here.
What does
which means foreigner.
Gosh, really?
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, in Malaga, a lot of Spanish people are foreigners, aren't they? Given when the Brits had overrun the Costa del Sol, but there it is. And you've worked in the NHS, so you've been helping people in the most immediate and urgent way for decades, and yet you can't have a vote. You can't cast a vote in a general election.
That's right. It bugs me every time.
No one's ever shone a light on this before, I don't think, before Keir Starmer picked up on it. This idea that you just should be fully engaged. If you're engaged enough in a society to help treat poorly people or help look after poorly people, you're engaged enough to get a vote, aren't you?
Yes, I have participated in everything. I play football all my life. My best friends are English, and there you go.
Just out of interest, why have you never applied for? Can you do that or not?
Well, because I never had to. I had leave to remain, and then I have settled status, so I never had to. But to me, a passport really is I am as much. I love England as much as I do Spain.
Sure.
And the passport really is a piece of paper. I always said that if they say to me, and I told that to my children, if they say to me, well, we're going to chuck you out, I say, give me the piece of paper and I sign it.
Yeah.
It makes no difference.
Yeah. No,
it doesn't change me what I am.
No, and it doesn't change the contribution that you've made to the country that you love, for which everybody listening will be grateful. Even, I suspect, the ones who don't think you should have the right to vote here. They're not going to turn around and encourage people from within the NHS to, hang on. Yeah, well, let's go on the side of optimism with that one. Enrique, thank you. It's 11:47. 2 years in New Zealand, 2 years of residency, you can vote regardless of Commonwealth status or other matters. And the reason why Ken can vote as indefinite leave to remain from Malaysia is because Malaysia is a Commonwealth country, which I didn't know. You learn something new every day. Whereas Shane, being from Thailand, albeit that he spent 30 years here and has indefinite leave to remain, he can't. So that distinction was correct. It's a right old hodgepodge, isn't it, really? That notion of democracy being simple, one person, one vote, or no taxation without representation, or whatever it may be, is clearly nonsense. But I'll tell you something interesting. Rees-Mogg and Cruddas, largely on the same side, I think, of British politics, as in the sort of absolutely crackerjack side of it. Rees-Mogg has just described that imposition of mandatory voter ID as a gerrymandering scheme, so admitting that it was a deliberate attempt to manipulate election results that backfired for the Conservatives because it largely affected older people who were more likely to vote Tory. So Rees-Mogg giving a speech in a crypt somewhere at the moment saying that it was definitely gerrymandering, so confirming Peter Cruddas' view that it is a very deliberate attempt to try to manipulate the vote in the Conservatives' favour, but saying that it backfired because it was older people who were turned away, which is at odds, of course, well, unless the preponderance of people who were observably non-white who were turned away, according to the research by one organisation, unless they were older and therefore more likely to vote Conservative as opposed to non-white and therefore more likely to vote Labour. Oh, what a tangled web they weave when first they practice to deceive. Jack's in Newark in Nottinghamshire. Jack, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, first of all, I must thank you for keeping me sane over the last 6 years.
Well, how do I know that I have? How can you prove that you are sane, Jack? That's the question. You're listening to this program. Go on.
And the medications that I keep now and used to take.
That'll do. Thank you.
James, thank you very much. And as a Dutchman, I thought I'd give you a call. I've been here since 1984. I dare say a paid-up member. Still got a funky accent, and I apologise for that, but not too much.
Oh, don't be silly.
Thank you. I adopted 2 children in England.
Gosh.
2 English children.
Yes.
And who have English passports. And when as a matter of fact, they are now in their 30s.
Yeah.
And they can vote. I can only vote in local elections. I joined the fire service. And believe it or not, in the 13 years that I gave service, nobody ever asked me for my passport when they were upside down in the ditch.
So you're running you're running into a burning house and you're not asked for your credentials.
Sorry, I think underneath your breathing apparatus, I think there's a foreign accent.
God, I'd never thought of it like that.
But and therefore, I thought it's just madness. I feel very strongly about what's happening in this country.
Yes.
In 1984, it was a relatively free country. Yes. You remember that, don't you, James? And now it's sort of, there's more and more influence on our freedom.
It's slipping. Something is slipping away, and I suspect people like you are more aware of it than people like me.
Well,
if I didn't do this,
I'll make it worse for you.
I'll
tick another box. I'm Jewish, so this is like I ticked all of them, haven't I?
Yes, I suppose.
And my family came over, and my uncle came over in the last days before Germany invaded Holland and had his life in England. And probably one of the reasons why I came over as well, became a very successful businessman. Yes. I just became an ordinary firefighter sitting in the back of a truck going, Nina.
There are no ordinary firefighters.
Oh, bless you. I know where your sympathy is there these days, I dare say.
Yes, indeed.
But it's...
So he fled the Holocaust, effectively. His family fled the Holocaust, and now you live in a country where the Home Secretary is asked to stop using language that reminds Holocaust survivors of what they fled, and she says, "No, I won't. I won't stop."
I don't want to digress, but maybe it is time for 1 or 2 people to visit Auschwitz and actually have a look around what these policies all mean in the end.
Or where the language leads, if we're not careful, because no one suggests that we're at the gates of Auschwitz yet. But the gate, the road to Auschwitz was long, and it contained words like invasion, as we know.
And that's a finish there. That's the finish, and it finished 70 members of my family. So I feel altogether, well, James, for goodness sake, it's so English to apologise for everything. It's not your fault.
Right, I'm expressing sympathy. I'm not taking responsibility, mate.
I'm only for my lawyer in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. God, that would be a compensation case, wouldn't it? What is the what has stopped you from assuming dual nationality or surrendering?
Well, first of all, that is not as easy as it used to be.
No, okay.
Okay, and there is something else, and it's called principle, but this country used to have that as well.
Yes. I know, I understand
I'm not sitting an exam where somebody's going to ask my knowledge of Richard I and Richard II, because that doesn't qualify me as somebody suitable to live in England.
You didn't have to do that before becoming a firefighter, which is relevant again.
Exactly. Or more important, adopt 2 children.
Or more importantly, adopt 2 children. So, good enough to be a parent, but not good enough to get a vote. It's mad, Jack, and I'm grateful to you and all my callers today for blowing the lid off it in a way that we should have probably done years ago. Could we count this as a Brexit benefit? Because the Daily Mail tried to turn it into a story about Brexit, which it categorically isn't. We now all have a much better understanding of the issues faced by people like Jack and Laurent and Enrique and everyone else who has called in today, Malemka, than we ever would have done otherwise. Thank you, Jack. It's 11:57. Rosie's in Guildford. Rosie, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
I'm so glad you're bringing up this topic today.
It's a big one.
I felt so compelled to call, and I just want to share a little bit of my experience. And I came to the UK as a student in 2005, and then I settled permanently in 2007. So I've lived for the past 16 years in this country. I'm a Swiss citizen, Swiss national, but I don't have the right to vote here. I can't vote on a local.
No.
And I can't vote on a national either. And yeah, my husband is from Malaysia,
right,
and he's got the indefinite to remain.
Yes.
And he can vote.
So in New Zealand, 2 years residency, you get the vote. That seems a fairly straightforward way of doing things, doesn't it?
Yeah. I wish it was like that.
Yeah, we could end up with Jacinda Ardern.
Yeah. We pay we have got our own business,
yes,
and we pay our taxes. We've got 3 children. The 3 of them have the British passport.
Right.
And yeah, I wish I could vote. I wanted to vote in a local election 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
But my husband could.
And you couldn't. I don't know why that is.
I couldn't.
It's all about so many different statuses over the years as well, isn't it? And does because you carry this? I'm surprised. I knew my phones would ring off the hook in the first hour when we were talking about 16 or 17-year-olds. And I knew if I wanted a bunch of idiots to ring in and explain why people like you shouldn't have the vote, then I could get the phones to ring off the hook with the Gammon and Pineapple Party. But I didn't realise so many people like you carried such a sense of grievance, if you like, or such a sense of unfairness on this issue.
My other option is to try to get the British passport, which I could. But up to now, I've never had any reason to
we talked about this
voting on a national level.
But also that idea that you somehow have to prove something in order to exercise what should just be rights, either residential rights or income tax rights or whatever it is. We've never had that before.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Feel fair.
I remember after Brexit, a lot of people telling me they didn't want to apply for this thing because it felt like you had to produce your papers or what, and we've done it, I think, largely by accident, but for some people, of course, on purpose. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, everybody who has helped me come to a better understanding of that issue, a much better understanding, actually, of that issue. It's coming up to 12 noon. I thought we'd do something completely different, and then I realised it wasn't completely different because it not only involves a policy proposal potentially from the Labour Party, but it's something else that Rocco Forte has objected to. If you don't know who Rocco Forte is, then, well, I apologise, frankly, for bringing him to your attention, but he is a Tory donor and passionate Brexiteer who's thinking of moving back to Italy. Well, not even back to Italy, I presume he was born here, but he's thinking of moving to Italy because of the state of this country. And, I mean, remarkably, frankly, given that we're constantly being told how they haven't got any ideas and they don't stand for anything, we've got another Labour Party proposal to contemplate together next. This one is a plan to protect workers from being contacted by their bosses outside of normal working hours. This is one of the topics. You see, if I had to make a list of topics where I wish I could be indiscreet about my colleagues at LBC, you would struggle to guess which topics those were, wouldn't you? I might occasionally say something that makes you think I'm alluding to a colleague when I'm definitely, categorically not. You might occasionally think that, I'd love to know what other people at LBC are like with regard to that story. Or I bet O'Brien's the worst offender on that one, whatever it is. Hey. I wish I could be indiscreet on this one. I wonder if you could guess which of my LBC colleagues are the worst offenders on badgering producers all hours of the day and night, regardless of when their actual working day begins and ends. For once, I think I can state with some confidence that on this particular issue, I am a paragon of virtue. I never, apart from the very occasion, outside working hours, never actually, but inside working hours, not much either, which is not much of a testament to the amount of effort I'm putting into the programme when I'm not actually behind the microphone. But I am, and remember that I'm ex-newspaper as well, albeit briefly, and you are never off duty once you reach a certain level on a newspaper. You're even if you've got a deputy, you're never really off duty because sometimes your deputy will want to run by you but the person who is senior to both of you is calling for, and the deputy doesn't want to do something that you might come into work the next day and disapprove of. That was the most stressful period of my career. It might not sound exciting. Show business editor of a national newspaper. I mean, it might not sound stressful. It might just sound exciting. One long round of parties, and I'm writing a bit about phone hacking at the moment for the new book, and the pressure that you're under to come up with stories actually allows me to understand how these people could do something that is really egregious. up to and including the Millie Dowler example, which is, of course, what blew the lid off the whole insidious practice. But when it was just, checking the voicemails of members of the royal family or pop stars or actors and actresses, I can see how it happened. And a large part of the reason why it happened would be enormous pressure to come up with scoops, to come up with stories, which is why the phone hacking went to right up the chain of command, as far as I can tell. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. So that pressure, and the worst thing, the very worst thing. Oh, do you remember that? Do you remember that Nokia ringtone? Or are you all too young? Oh, man, that still turns my tummy over, that Nokia ringtone. I've got mixed feelings about the old Nokias. I was incredibly good at Snake. Do you remember Snake? I could fill a whole screen on Snake. I compare it to other people. I reckon I was world class. I could have gone to the Olympics for playing Snake on the Nokia. But that ringtone, and don't say, why didn't you change it? That ringtone used to, because if it went off any time after, I was going to say 1 o'clock, but actually about 9 or 10 o'clock, it was never good news. No one normal rings you at that time. If anyone from your family is ringing you at that time, it's going to be bad news probably. After 11 o'clock, let's say. Once you reach an age where your mates aren't all out partying, asking you if you want to come and join them. But if your phone rings after 11 o'clock, it's going to be bad news, right? And the nature of familial bad news is that it's not going to be your family. Once in 100,000 times, it might be something terrible that's happened in your family situation. So if it's going off 2 or 3 times a week or more, and every single time it's your night editor, the night news editor. Oh, I have that thing when your mouth waters a bit with stress and fear. Did you hear that? I closed my eyes then and tried to conjure up the memory so I could convey it to you in a more poetic fashion. And I conjured up the memory too much, and I just got a little bit of the fear from it. And he was a lovely bloke, actually, the night news editor, very sympathetic to my uselessness. And he'd go, all right, hello, all right, Terry. And he'd say, I don't know if you've seen this story in the Mail, James. And I go, no, I haven't. I'm out, or I'm in bed. I'm fast asleep, hiding. And he said, well, they've got this. And I would never know what, because I'd never had the contacts. I never had the, I don't know what the word is really, talent probably. And it was awful, because I'd then have to write something. I'd have to rewrite Daily Mail copy so that the Daily Express could put it into later editions, or occasionally I'd chance my arm and say, no, that's absolutely not true. I'm not writing that story. The Mail have got it all wrong, which is very rarely true, on Showbiz at least. They get the politics all wrong, but they don't make that many mistakes on Showbiz. And it was awful. So I was never off duty. And the toll that took, look, I'm 51, right? And I knocked that job on the head before I was 29, I think. Around about 29, 30. So that is over 20 years ago. I'm very, very blessed in that I look back over stressful periods of my working life, and the biggest one is over 20 years ago. You could be listening to this and it's today. I do get that. I'm very, very conscious of serendipity, luck, for being fortuitous. But my God, it was bad. Because you're never, ever, ever off duty. You're on a line. You're on a wire. And this is before technology was as pervasive and as powerful as it is now. This was just the phone, you know. But oh, gone again. Tummy's just flipped. So I know what it's like when your bosses are able to contact you outside of normal working hours. My example is extraordinary because I can't object. I signed up for that. That was the deal, right? It's a national newspaper that is putting editions out at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you are a section editor of that newspaper and have full or have a large amount of control over what goes in the relevant sections. But I'm just describing the emotion of it. Do you know that if you are in France, all staff in France have had the right to just disconnect their phones and laptops outside working hours since 2017? Now, I would suggest the media is slightly different if it's a breaking news story. If something happens at 10 o'clock tonight and I happen to have... Well, no, I wouldn't need to contact you, would I? Because even if I've got a guest, we'd wait until I got in the next morning. Even if I set up the interview myself, I said, I've got someone who can talk to us about this. I can't really imagine any circumstances in which I'd badger you outside of your working day. You badger me quite a lot. outside of my working day, but my working day is only really 3 hours long, so I can't really complain about that. Are you free on the 17th to do a podcast with Jack Whitehall? Oh, honestly, God, is my life not my own? Is there no rest for the wicked? Can I not have some peace? Could you not have asked me in the morning? I've got to pin it down now. His people have been really flipping. Actually, Jack Whitehall's people are lovely. I'm just joking around. But that notion, the right to switch off laws. So how bad is it? I think that's the way to do this one. Bosses are welcome to contribute. Inevitably, perhaps, our favourite hotelier today, Rocco Forte, in this quite frankly spectacularly tin-eared interview that he's given to the Times newspaper, he attacks these sort of ideas. Listen, mate, no one's suggesting that hotel workers can work from home. It's people with office jobs who are just as capable of doing it from home as they are from work. But he's very, very cross about it. If you're a civil servant, he says, having absolutely no experience whatsoever of being a civil servant, you need the stimulus of working from an office, as the bloke who's thinking of moving to Italy after the Brexit that he campaigned for went so badly. So this objection to Labour proposals to protect workers from overbearing bosses, what could Rocco Forte possibly have against it? I leave you to speculate. But how bad is it? That's what I want to know. And can I make a confession? If I was still in my 30s and I still had the rear view mirror of my experiences on Fleet Street behind me, and crucially, before I went into therapy, I would now be arguing quite passionately in favour of bosses on this. If I was still a victim, if you like, of quite aggressive workplace cultures, I would now be arguing in favour of this. I'd be in favour of bosses. I'd be saying, it's ridiculous. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Yeah, but why? Why do you need to call someone at 8 o'clock at night? Why can't you wait until the next morning? See, there's no answer. Why can't you wait until the next morning? If it's the kind of job where it can't wait until the next morning, then it won't be outside work hours. It'll be like being a newspaper journalist. There will be an understanding. Or an NHS consultant. There you go, from Frank. Try being an NHS consultant on call, James. It's the standard iPhone ring that gives me the cold sweats. That's the point. You've signed up for it. You're on call. You know that's not outside work hours. Even if you're on call, it's not outside work hours. So those jobs, I mean, what it is self-important bosses who think, almost revel in the fact that you have to drop everything when they ring. And status becomes crucial here, because you look at your phone and you see who it is and you think, well, I have to answer that, even though I don't want to. It's going to be a right old pain in the pineapple. And crucially, it's going to be a waste of my time anyway. And there's no earthly way that this is going to be something I couldn't have sorted out in the morning. But they've called me now, 9 o'clock at night, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to have to deal with this now. Otherwise, they're going to get the hump and that'll make my job harder tomorrow. So tell me about the experience of working for a boss, working for a manager, working for an employer who thinks that your time outside work in some way belongs to them. All right? That's what I want. I want to know what it's like. And the more ridiculous the relationship, the funnier. I'm not making light of it, but the idea that, there's no earthly way anyone could think that this call needed to be made. Do you see what I mean? It's 9 o'clock at night and I can't find my paper clips. So 0345 6060 973. Just to be clear, I know what on call means. Everybody knows what on call means. This is about not being on call. This is about having employers who think that you belong to them, even if you are absolutely off duty. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Very busy morning. This will be quieter. I mentioned that just by way of encouragement. If you couldn't get through for the first 2 hours, but you think you've got something to contribute to this one, I don't think it will be quite as busy. But you never know. Let's find out. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Didn't know that, did you? 86-page compilation of policies that is expected to form the basis of Labour's general election manifesto and will be considered during the party's National Policy Forum in July. And it contains proposals or a new code of conduct for employers that would prevent them from being able to badger you. It gives you, they call it a right to switch off. And if you think it's not workable, then in France, since 2017... you have the right, unless you're in a sort of on-call or emergency type job, you have the right to disconnect from phones and laptops outside working hours. And extra protections, Jonathan Reynolds, the Shadow Business Secretary, has said are needed to ensure that people could build a family life. That's very true as well, isn't it? You get ripped out of the middle of family dinner or something like that, and it puts stress on you just to know when you leave at the end of the day that that's it until tomorrow. However stressful your job is, you can close the door on it overnight. I just think that's actually valuable, not just good politics. Zoe's in Dulwich. Zoe, what made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, interestingly, going back about 13 years ago, I worked...
About 13, approximately 13 years.
Approximately.
Okay, I'm glad we're being clear.
Just so we can't narrow down who it is I'm talking about.
Yes, all right then.
I'm an executive assistant, and I worked for a high net worth individual on a business and private basis, but he wasn't based in the UK.
Okay.
Sort of the non-domicile status.
Yes.
And so the normal working hours, 9 to 5, I was expected to be at the office. But then he could be in the Far East and he could phone at 2, 3, 4 a.m.
No.
If I didn't pick up on the first call, the language and the ferocious sort of tone that he would take would just be horrendous. And, the laptop had to be up and powered and ready, to start taking notes and things like that. And there was no consideration for the fact that, that it was the middle of the night for me. It was just, well, I pay you, so you'll now work.
How much of that had you could he conceivably have argued you'd signed up for, you'd known about when you signed up, when you took the job, do you think?
I don't know. So obviously I knew that he was non-domicile, but predominantly Europe-based.
Yeah.
So the timing there, I wasn't made aware of the frequency of trips, further afield, which meant that the time zone would seriously come into effect. And actually, I would have accepted it if there was, you work the hours I work.
Yes.
So, if I sort of covered the time zone he was in, absolutely acceptable. And that's kind of what I do now, and I'm still an EA.
Okay.
But yeah.
You might have a very, very quiet morning or something when you were expected to be on call or at work at the office.
At work, yeah.
When you wouldn't have to do much, and then come 4 o'clock in the morning because he's in Dubai. I know, don't text me with time zones. I'm just using it as a figure of speech. Then you've got to be absolutely. I mean, that's going to play havoc with your personal life.
It did, and I had to choose between continuing with the job and my relationship, because my partner, fortunately is now my husband, but at the time it was an incredible, he's got to sleep and get up for work the next day, and, so it wasn't the nicest time.
No, I can imagine. How did it end? I mean, because you say he was incredibly persistent, your employer, not your husband. Or maybe he was incredibly persistent as well. That's why you're married now. But how did it end? I mean, did you reach breaking point, or did you sort of come to a...
Yeah, I just handed in my notice. And funnily enough, when I handed in my notice, I'd learnt that I was about the 5th or 6th person to have had that role in, probably about 2 years.
Right.
So I think that's, just the nature of the job.
Could he have put a number on it? I mean, if you were being paid, because, executive assistants are pretty well paid anyway, but would there have been a figure at which you'd have gone, yeah, that's fair enough, as long as we're both clear about what we're doing here?
No, not if it had continued in the same way. Mental health in my relationship was worth way more than what he could have tried to do, and it was a well-paid position.
I'm sure it was. Yes, that's why you said executive, not personal, when you rang in, isn't it? I wasn't born yesterday, Zoe. And that's the point. I mean, you prioritise. He probably wouldn't understand the notion of prioritising family, personal life, mental health over the pursuit of the business. And most of us aren't built like that. Although most people with executive assistants probably are. Thank you, Zoe. It's 24 minutes after 12. Patrick is in Stoke-on-Trent. Patrick, what would you like to say?
To talk. I came...
We've got a dodgy phone line. It must have happened just in the last couple of minutes, so that means that it can be undone as quickly as it was done. So I don't know if you've fallen down a well or climbed up a ladder or something like that, but I do want to hear from you. Steve's in Chester, meanwhile. Steve, what would you like to say?
Hello. Yeah,
Hello,
I used to work for a French firm. I had a sort of departmental head job around 6 or 7 building sites around the UK, big ones, power stations.
Fantastic.
And each of the French project directors on each of these sites, who I got to know quite well as I was visiting, they started to vanish around about September, October, November because they'd done their hours for the year.
Right.
So they're home playing golf on full pay. Henri is gone. Here is Nicole. He's taken over till April. Whereas all of us on the British contract we'd all signed the 48-hour waiver. So not only were you doing the 6 in the morning till 6 at night, 6 days a week, you were also expected to be getting your reports ready outside hours. And someone commented to me, we should have let Napoleon win.
Sorry, it took a while for the penny to drop on that one.
I think you had a valid point. We should have done.
Let me just have a think. But isn't that bad for business? I mean, you were in charge, so you can tell me. Is it not suboptimal to have the workforce disappearing like that?
Well, they managed it. It was a very successful firm. They made an awful lot of money. And all
very
the projects
Anglo-Saxon, isn't it? I'm just thinking. Oh no, you can't possibly. No, the point is, if that is the rules, then if you're good at running a business, you accommodate the rules. It's a bit like minimum wage and living wage, and they say, oh no, I can't do that. But you're of the political view that if someone can't pay their bills, they should go and get another job. If you can't pay these wages, you should go and run another business. Do you see what I mean? So they pulled it off, and the Brits who'd waived the 48-hour working time directive got the dirty end of the stick.
And they made a lot of money, were very successful, got a lot of contracts. Their only main competitor was a Swiss firm, which did pretty much the same, and all the British ones lost money on all the...
And yet they tell us we're the lazy ones, or we're the ones... What is it, Rob and Patel said, that we're the laziest in the world, or something like that, the laziest workers in Europe. I like that. That's quite interesting. It's not quite being on call all the time, is it? Or being able to turn off.
If you're expected to, I was sort of head of compliance and things like that for the firm, and it was reports, must be done, 24-hour deadline, that sort of thing. So you're never turning off, not once.
No, that's not healthy. And you know what they're saying, don't you? As when they're asked what Brexit benefits there are on the horizon, you know one of the things they've come up with.
Can we do 100-hour weeks? Is that one of them?
Yeah, abolish the 48-hour working time directive, even though you can already opt out of it, as you've just demonstrated.
You have no choice. You don't get the job if you don't opt out.
Well, exactly. It's the same in journalism, but they think that somehow rendering it redundant or removing it completely from everybody and anybody would represent progress. Progress for whom, one wonders? Presumably for the kind of people who can afford to give £500,000 to the Tory party. Steve, thank you. Squeeze in Julie, who's in Maidstone. Julie, what would you like to say?
Hello. My daughter was a bank manager, and she was really flying high. She was getting Bank Manager of the Year and all that.
Yes.
Had a new area manager came.
Oh, yeah.
And this area manager would start on her 5 o'clock in the morning, sending texts.
5 o'clock?
Phones. Yes.
Gosh.
Just to do by 8 o'clock when she got to work. By the time she got to work, there was more things. She'd work all day like mad.
Yeah.
She'd go home in the evening, and the calls and texts went till 11 o'clock at night. Even Sunday wasn't free. And I watched my daughter lose weight, became a nervous wreck. She lost 3 stone.
Oh, Lord.
And eventually I persuaded her, you need to go to the doctors. You are in such a state.
Yes.
As soon as the doctor started to talk nicely to her, she burst into tears, the floodgate.
Yeah.
And I said it's the worst case of bullying he'd heard.
Good Lord.
I signed her off, put her on medication and all the rest of it. Then she felt she just couldn't go back to work. No matter how long, she just couldn't. Gave up the job. But she went for constructive dismissal. And what was going on...
Can't believe it. The phone's gone funny, Julie. Just at the crucial point. This is ridiculous. It's like you've led us to water and we can't have a drink. So I got to the bit. She went for constructive dismissal and...
And she didn't really get much on that.
Oh.
The person, her job was refilled and the next person committed suicide.
Oh, my days, Julie.
And that person, that manager, is still there as far as I'm aware.
Well, I'm glad you haven't given too much detail on that.
No, I wouldn't.
No, and also there are,
But
it's never one reason that prompt. And what? I mean, she was already brilliant at her job, your daughter. So this attitude wasn't going to get more out of her or improve her performance or make her bank manager of the year, because she was already bank manager of the year. Oh.
And she changed and had a complete career change.
Is she better now? Is she in a happier place now?
She's a happier place, and she's now a train driver.
Is that right?
Yes.
I don't know what to say to that, really. From bank manager to train driver, I like it.
She said at least they don't phone her in the evenings.
Well, there's not a lot you can do from home, is there? Thank you, Julie. And obviously, it's never one reason that prompts people to contemplate taking their own life, or indeed to do it. But you understand why Julie brought that to our attention. If you are affected by any issues such as that, or feeling in any way battered at the moment, then the Samaritans are there, of course, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can get hold of them on 116 123, or if you want to communicate differently, then just go to samaritans.org. 12:30 is the time. Amelia Cox is here with your headlines. It's 12:34. Back to people who bosses who never let you have any sort of downtime in a minute. But I've just remembered that Rees-Mogg was leader of the Commons when they brought in the plans to make voter ID mandatory. That means that he was one of the architects of a policy that he's now described as a deliberate attempt to gerrymander votes, saying that it's backfired. That's quite significant. I know that if you're a Brexit supporting Tory, you don't care about these things anymore. You've given up really on integrity or honesty or consistency or transparency or accountability or decency. I do understand that, and I know that in really, really dark moments it must be an incredible burden that you bear, because you never actually signed up for that, but that's sadly what you have to sign up to now in order to sustain your support for people like Rees-Mogg and Johnson and issues like Brexit. But that means that now he is not only admitting that it was gerrymandering, it's the word he uses, but he's also possibly forgetting that he was the one charged with steering it through the Commons, or at least he was leader of the House of Commons when it was first proposed. Here's the direct quote: "Parties that try and gerrymander end up finding their clever scheme comes back to bite them, as dare I say we found by insisting on voter ID for elections. We found the people who didn't have ID were elderly, and they, by and large, voted Conservative. So we made it hard for our own voters, and we upset a system that worked perfectly well." I won't be able to find it in time, but I mean, I wonder what he said when he was leader of the Commons. In order to, here it is. No, he did defend it. "It is important that elections are fair and proper." The lady opposite mentioned that we don't have to prove who we are when we vote in division lobbies in normal circumstances, but she's forgetting that we're not allowed to wear overcoats in the division lobbies, just in case we send somebody through to vote in our place. So therefore, there are requirements in this place to prevent impersonation. So that was the best he could do when trying to defend what it would have mattered once. Before Brexit, before Boris Johnson, before Liz Truss, a member of government, a former member of government, admitting that he was complicit in a plan to deliberately suppress votes, to gerrymander, look it up, to gerrymander. That would have mattered once. It might even have been career-ending. That's very sad, actually. I know we do a lot of knockabout stuff on the programme, and I bow to nobody in my enthusiasm for pointing out the fundamental fraudulence at the heart of Jacob Rees-Mogg and people like him, but my God, that's sad. A former member of government admitting, while still in Parliament, remember, still a member of the House of Commons, admitting that he was complicit in an attempt to suppress the votes of British people. Admitting it out loud in front of an audience. Well done. 12:37 is the time. Back to employers who refuse to recognise that you can switch off, and why Labour are considering a right to switch off, very similar to what has been in place in France since 2017. Patrick is in Stoke-on-Trent. Patrick, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I mean, I'll start off by saying there's going to be jobs, there's going to be careers such as yours and what you've previously...
My old one, not this one. Anyone bothers me now when I'm on my downtime, and I won't even pick up.
No, I mean, in terms of the early days,
Yes.
what you discussed, you're going to be in a position, if you don't answer the phone, you're going to miss important things. And
exactly.
if you're the a top police detective, and you're going to get a phone call.
We've got him, boss. We've got him. Do you want to come in and question him? I'll be in the morning as usual.
Not really.
All right.
I'm in Toby Carvery at the minute. It's going to have to wait, I'm afraid.
I'm just getting my stuffing. Go on.
I completely get that. There's jobs that you sign up to and you know what's expected. However,
yes.
I come from a background. I had an 11-year career within retail at probably the country's largest retailer.
Okay.
In supermarkets. And the culture I saw there, even though, I worked for a great boss. I had a great boss who I still speak to this day, despite being left for 3 years. And it was never personal, but the culture within these supermarkets and where I was. If it wasn't a phone call, it's a WhatsApp group. Every company seems to have WhatsApp groups now that you can mute and you can see coming up on your phone. But for myself, I'd have 1 day off a week, and I would mute the group.
Yes.
But when you're seeing things being discussed within that group, I was a department manager, and if your department's under scrutiny through no reason of yourself, you've got to look at it. You just the curiosity.
Well, it's like walking past a door and you know they're talking about you inside, and the urge to stick your ear against the keyhole is irresistible.
Absolutely, and it's a case of it's better to take the phone call, to read the text, because if you don't, I'd have many days where I would leave on a Wednesday night, think, right, that's it till Friday morning. I'd see things coming through on a Thursday. I would have a missed call off other people within the store.
Really?
As a senior authority that I wouldn't normally have a lot of day-to-day dealings with. So I'm thinking, something's going down, something's happening there that I need to be aware of.
Yeah, so the stress would be worse if you ignored it in a way, because then
I would ignore it, James.
FOMO.
I'd go, well, I'm with my kids, I'm out with my daughter, I'm not answering that phone call.
Yeah.
But then you'd notice for the next 15 minutes, you'd be sat in a gaze thinking, well, what if this? I wonder if it's that. Has someone rung in sick? Has someone not done this? So you return the call, and then you go down a minefield of being asked to do things, being questioned about things, and then that's your day off gone. Your day off
None
gone
of which you're being paid for.
How you're thinking about going into Friday, then thinking I'm going to have to pick that up on Friday now, which I haven't planned to.
Would it have been possible to run a supermarket equally efficiently without any of this going on?
Of course, but they don't want to spend the money they need to. So I came from a department where it was a very skilled area. There was probably less than 5% of the store who'd be able to achieve the job that me and my department could because of the skill and the training that's involved. And if you've got store managers who are coming in who've never worked on that department, that was often the case, rather than fixing the issue in store with skilled people, which often they wouldn't have because they'd refused to pay for it, or it was just easy.
So it's free work for you. Getting you to work for free, which saves them money.
Oh, essentially.
And these are companies that post some of the biggest profits in the country.
Oh yeah, of course. That's all it comes down to, and it was most of the time any issue I'd be contacted about wasn't due to my planning or my organisation. It would have been other store impacts that would have impacted my department, which would have set it. In my department, it was a bakery. If you found half an hour behind in a bakery on some cycle, you're 4 to 5 hours down on the day. You're missing things.
Shelves are empty.
People then leave. People leave shifts. The scaled down team comes on later in the day, and there's a knock-on effect. But people think you can just pull bread loaves out your backside within the space of 10 minutes.
Please never do that. I promise you. And then you knocked it on the head. Did you reach the end of your tether? Was that part of the reason why you changed?
It got to 2020 during lockdown. The pressures were even more immense with less of a workforce. This was a time when it was a case of soon as someone sniffled or coughed, they were going home for 2 weeks.
Yes, of course.
When you open that sort of criteria up to employees who most of them would be genuine, but of course you're going to have your disingenuous colleagues that think, I only have to go in and cough and I can go home for 2 weeks paid.
Yes.
So that culture started, the pressures got even worse. Us as managers
gets harder and harder and harder.
And I got to the point where I thought, I need to get out of this because my daughters are suffering, my wife's suffering because I'm on at her all the time. And I've now found the ironic thing, I'm now in a career which I do really like. I enjoyed that career. It was a great career, James. It really was.
No, I like retail.
But I'm in a job now where there's a lot more at stake. I work with very vulnerable children within a care setting. The stakes are a lot higher. I've probably been contacted by my boss in 3 years.
Because they know. Well, in a way, that makes sense to me, actually. Even though the stakes are higher, that means that the downtime is even more precious, doesn't it? In a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also that when you're not there, it's going to be there's going to be enough hands on the pump anyway. or at least you'd flipping well hope so. I appreciate that might be a little bit optimistic in some contexts, but not enough to be bothering you when you're at home. It's an odd one, isn't it? It's I hadn't thought of that because we got the overbearing boss. We got the boss who thinks that he or she is the beginning, the middle, and the end of the universe. But then you've actually got the baked-in business practice, which is to get more out of people than you're paying them for, and that's what you describe. And it's very, very hard, as you say, to opt out of that for the reasons you describe. Have you come across the phrase quiet quitting?
No, I don't think I have.
So this popped up last year. I think this is a really English thing or a really British thing, because if you can clock off in France at the end of the day and they're not even allowed to phone you or email you, the idea that quiet quitting, I think it's going to be Anglo-Saxon. I bet America are into this as well as the UK. In fact, I bet everywhere where Rupert Murdoch has got a major media presence are complaining about quiet quitting, which is a ludicrous phrase to describe people doing what they're paid to do. You clock off and you're done for the day. That is controversial in the Anglo-sphere. That is controversial in the country that we live in, or in America. And it shouldn't be, should it? If you want, look, I'll do it, but you jolly well pay me for it. That's what happens, I suppose, when trades unions have been absolutely castrated in many sectors, including Patrick's, not perhaps in railways, which is why Julie's daughter is now a train driver instead of a bank manager. Oh, it's like we script it. It's like, look at that for symmetry. Patrick, thank you. And I'm glad that you're in a better place, albeit with what is on paper a more pressurised and more stressful job. But in practice, of course, it's all about good employment practices, which is why the Labour Party is keen to bring in worker protections or a code of conduct for employers. Because if you leave it up to them to be the best possible employers they can be, most of them won't accept the invitation. I've been incredibly lucky over my career in that field, actually, but I've had my experiences. In retail, I had a manager in retail who was just utterly unbearable. He derived enormous pleasure from the knowledge that it would take an awful lot for you to turn around and leave. And he probably wanted to. This is going back decades, because it was an era when there was no shortage of staff. There was no difficulty at all in filling applications. If you come in, you inherit a workforce that gets on really well with each other. And if you work in retail, the fun you have on the shop floor is 50, 60, 70% of the job satisfaction, right? It's you do your job, you work hard, you produce the goods, but you get on really well with each other. You have a really good time. Manager comes in, wants to break it up for reasons, and therefore becomes a complete tyrant. God, he was an awful person. He really was. Probably shouldn't say his name on the radio. 12:49 is the time. That speech in which Jacob Rees-Mogg confessed that as a member of government he engaged in a plan to suppress votes, to manipulate results, to gerrymander. It contained another little moment as well that I thought I'd share with you. The gentleman who interrupts this, well, you can hear his voice. He's quite elderly, and he is subsequently manhandled from the stage, which is, the risk you take if you're going to interrupt a public meeting. But I just thought it was very interesting, this, because I'm very keen to know what he was going to say, which is not something I've ever said about Jacob Rees-Mogg.
National consensus. Ladies and gentlemen, you all look very nice people, and I'm sure you are fantastically nice people, but I would like to draw your attention...
So this chap has interrupted the speech.
A few characteristics of fascism. Just because you...
Get off the stage. Get on out.
Well, there we go. Our jolly good fellow has had to leave, but we believe in freedom of speech. So he can have his National Lilies Conference next week, and he can see how many people he gets to come along.
Interesting now. It's being billed as some sort of conservatism conference, but it's not. Braverman's there, Rees-Mogg is there, but it's the annual gathering of what's best described as a low-tax populist nationalism movement run by a mysterious American think tank. You sometimes think I'm exaggerating when I warn you about the direction of traffic. I'd have quite liked to hear what that chap was going to say about fascism. Possibly he'd have mentioned the deliberate manipulation of democratic votes, or gerrymandering, as Jacob Rees-Mogg called it, when describing what his own government did when he was in it, or control of the press, collusion with the media. I don't know, maybe the arrest and incarceration of peaceful protesters. I don't know but that's a shame. Anyway, he was manhandled from the stage, and then Jacob Rees-Mogg called him a loony before claiming to defend freedom of speech. 12:52 is the time. Back to bosses who don't really know what a boundary is. Helen's in Sheffield. Helen, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. You have to excuse me because as you were saying, you had a moment of anxiety when you were having a flashback.
Yeah.
My heart is just crashing out of my chest at the moment.
Oh, dear.
Just because I'm back there.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't
it? It's really bad. So anyway, I was 21 years old. I moved out of Sheffield. I won't say the city, I won't say the company, etc. Okay. And I got a job as a sales coordinator for a huge fashion house. Something that I always wanted to do. And I was just so proud to have got the job. So my designated hours could have been 9 till 6, 8 till 6.
Yeah.
And I was in charge of sales, stock coordination, etc. The managing director, obviously, he interviewed me, etc. I got the job. And then probably for the first few months, it was pretty quiet. Everything was normal. And then the phone started. So bear in mind, I'm 21 years old and the phone calls would start from about 9 o'clock at night.
Oh.
And then it became very clear very quickly he was drunk.
No. Oh, Lord.
So he would ring me up under the guise of going through the stats of stock, distribution all over the UK.
Yeah.
We were going to go out into some of the papers to start the first line, sort of not even online, but sort of distribution via the papers with advert codes. So that was really bizarre to me, but I knew I had to face him the next morning. A young lady, sort of taking that, and then it ramped up a bit, and then the innuendos started kicking in, and I didn't know how to handle it, and it made me. And when you said that about I got a flutter that that. When my phone went, and it was the old-fashioned dial phone.
Yeah.
When that phone went
at that time,
I thought, yes, it could have been anything between 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And I felt almost compelled to answer it. Although I knew who it would be, I had to prepare myself because I was terrified of losing my job.
Of course.
So this kind of went on for about 18 months. So I had to face him the next morning, and he just acted as if nothing had been said. So I could go through the stats, which could have been done in office time.
Mm.
So I knew it was kind of... I had to face him.
It's a bit pervy, and it's a power game as well, isn't it?
It really was. It really was. So I got to... As we were coming towards I lasted 18 months there.
Gosh.
Because the defining moment was part of the fashion range that we did was also lingerie.
Oh, okay.
He must have really ramped it up.
Oh, dear.
With the drink.
Right.
Because he then told me I hadn't just got the job because of my talent. I got the job because I was blonde and I do well modelling the lingerie as well.
Oh, sleazebag.
And I thought I was going to throw up.
I bet.
That was the defining moment.
And you walked away, did you? You didn't go to HR. It's a different era, really, isn't it?
Years ago, it wasn't HR. It was kind of personnel. I was a young girl.
What would you do? Here's your word against his. Also, he's got power, and that is here's the thing. I wasn't expecting much of a silver lining, but there's been progress since then. We're still not there, are we? But I think that would be less likely to happen in those circumstances today. So you just walked away and got another job.
I did actually. Thank goodness. The couple of days after he went on holiday for a fortnight.
Oh yeah.
And I put my notice in the next day, so I didn't have to face him after that comment.
Yeah.
And I left. I didn't even do my notice. I went.
No one asked why, and you'd have told. Well, would you have told them?
I changed my phone number.
God. but we don't need a code of
stand
conduct.
it any moment. And it's still, as I say, when you said that,
I can hear it in your
immediately,
voice. I can hear it in your voice.
Yeah,
You're there again.
So,
you're back there, and it's powerlessness as well, isn't it? That's the thing, and well, that's why workers need protections from bosses. I mean, he was breaking all sorts of rules anyway. It wouldn't necessarily need the new rules in place, but the atmosphere, the culture, if you like, of I don't even know what to call that. It's beyond bullying. Pervy sounds a bit too seaside postcard. It doesn't sound serious enough. Helen, thank you, and sorry for bringing that back. Sorry for dragging up that echo of the not too distant past. But that kind of behaviour was a hell of a lot more commonplace. Right. In fact, I saw someone in the Daily Mail talking about who was it the other day? Oh, crikey! It was a story about attitudes at work. And Richard Littlejohn wrote an article that was practically nostalgic about the days when editors would routinely tell young female journalists to F off. I can't remember. Was there a story recently, last couple of weeks, where dinosaurs were invited to comment on how things were much better in the good old days? I can't remember. It will come to me shortly after I step off air, which I'm not going to do before crossing live to Agborough, where I'm told that the festivities in the Kidderminster Harriers dressing room that began shortly after 10 o'clock last night are now finally over, and the team are available to speak to me. What? Oh, come on. They're still, it's outrageous. All right then. Well, in that case, I think I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to the gentleman responsible for one of the finest days of my short life yesterday. I'm going to list them all as well, Sheil, but I'm still going to bring it in on time.
Do you know, I was just thinking as I was walking down the corridor and could see you, that
Yes.
today you look very young.
Thank you.
I was thinking, is it because you've just spent the day screaming like a teenage boy?
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. And I'm going to do the whole squad, even though some of these lads weren't in the team yesterday. So I'll do it in order. The order they went up for their medals yesterday: Tom Palmer, Alex Penny, Caleb Richards, Nat Knight Percival, Christian Pearce, Tom Leake, Tom Owen Evans, Nathan Lowe, Amari Morgan-Smith, Ashley Hemmings, Joe Fawkes, Jamie Emery, Zach Brown, Keziah Martin, Kyle Morrison, Ethan Fremantle, Kai Lismore, Jack Byrne, Rhys McNally, Jack Tolley, Shane Byrne, Kobe Hall, Joe Leasley and Christian Dibble, with, of course, the management team, Russ Penn's Red Army, his assistant Jimmy O'Connor, Lee Evans, the goalkeeping coach, and Richard Lane, the chairman. That was one of the finest days of my life, for which I will always owe every single one of those gentlemen a fairly large favour. I promise not to mention it again this week. Fingers crossed. That's it from me for another day. You can listen back to the whole show on Global Player, where you can also rewind live radio and find all of the LBC's shows, as well as the world's biggest podcasts. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick with you at 4. And Sheila Fogarty with you now.
It just goes to show, releasing your inner child. It's good for you.
It was like that.
Yeah.
It was madness.
Well, this isn't going to help anyone release their inner child. What I'm about to say, 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 their inner child. What I'm